Chapter 171, Third Person's POV. As Spider-Man and the others landed, they immediately began cleaning up the mess they had caused. Ghost, Firestar, handle the situation with his blood, Spider-Man quietly instructed, ensuring the military wouldn't overhear. We'll keep everyone else distracted while you both take care of it. They both nodded and discreetly made their way toward the college, which was mostly deserted due to the damage from the fire. Arya, without needing further instruction, scanned the area and highlighted a back corner of the building. There, I'm detecting a large concentration of blood. If I had to guess, it belongs to Bruce Banner, she informed them. Sneaking their way through the college, Ghost Spider and Firestar found a lab with multiple vials of blood. Though some placeholders were empty and a few vials were broken, the blood samples were still secured. Without hesitation, Ghost Spider and Firestar began destroying the vials. Ghost froze them until they shattered in her hands, while Firestar heated them until the blood evaporated into steam. Suddenly, Ghost Spider tapped the side of her head, sensing someone attempting to make a telepathic connection with her. There's a small crate of blood being extracted by the military, Scarlet Spider relayed through the mental link. They're taking the samples slowly to avoid detection. Peter has a new plan, have Lizzie cause a delayed explosion to wipe out the remaining samples, while you sneak in and retrieve the crate. Scarlet Spider, what did we say about using code names? Ghost Spider reprimanded. This is a spider-only telepathic link. No big deal, Scarlet Spider responded casually. We agreed to be cautious. Even telepathic links could be compromised. When we're in costume, it's code names only. We don't want another Spider-Cat incident, do we? Ugh, fine. You're right. I'll be more careful, Scarlet Spider sighed. Just because Spider-Man gave away his identity earlier doesn't mean we can be reckless. If anything, we have to be more vigilant. With the plan in mind, Ghost Spider turned to Firestar and relayed the updated orders from Spider-Man. She then sneaked out of the college, activating her camouflage to become invisible. She quickly made her way toward the military staging area, where trucks were being loaded. Ghost perched on a lamppost and tapped the side of her mask, scanning the area. A few crates were highlighted, showing vials of blood inside, hidden in what appeared to be ammo boxes. The military personnel guarding the crates were on high alert, weapons in hand. But Ghost wasn't concerned. With her new camouflage abilities, she smirked. That's it, she thought, as an idea formed in her mind. She fired her webs, which turned invisible due to the upgrades her camouflage underwent. The invisible webbing flew toward the crates, she watched as they vanished from sight, her web cloaking them, passing the camouflaging effects from her body through her webs. Smirking again, she pulled the crates toward her, unnoticed by the soldiers. She froze the blood inside until it shattered like ice. Ghost systematically destroyed every sample. As she finished the last one, an explosion erupted inside the college, causing panic among the soldiers. Meanwhile, nearby civilians looked on with sorrow, seeing the devastation of their homes. Spider-Man, observing their expressions, had a thoughtful look. I should start Feast and have Aunt May and Uncle Ben run it. After a few minutes, Spider-Man and the others finished organizing the rubble so it could be recycled. News crews that have long since arrived were filming the heroes' efforts. One reporter spotted Firestar, the newest member of the team, and called out to her. Firestar, realizing it was still the day of her debut, she smiled and officially introduced her hero name. Firestar, let's go. Nightwing called from above. Coming. Duty calls. She winked at the reporter before blasting off into the sky. Spider-Man and the rest of the team followed suit, swinging away and disappearing from view. Back at the Weaver, they found Bruce and Betty seated in front of a hologram of Arya in her spider costume, glaring at them. Arya, what are you doing? Spider-Man asked with amusement. Watching them. She replied, dramatically pointing two fingers at her eyes before pointing back at Bruce and Betty repeatedly. Her hologram flickered away. Well, she's lovely, Bruce said sarcastically. Betty chuckled, finding the exchange amusing. Bruce then turned serious. Look, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but can you just tell me how you're going to help me? Peter nodded, removing his helmet as he sat down in front of them. How do I explain this in a way that would be easier to understand? Let me put it this way. The Hulk is something unknown to you, and when humans are faced with the unknown, they fear it. They try to eliminate what scares them. No, I understand the Hulk perfectly, Bruce countered, shaking his head. He's a violent creature driven by nothing but anger and destruction. Whenever he surfaces, people get hurt. You're proving my point, Bruce, Peter said calmly. If you think that's all there is to the Hulk, you really don't know him at all. I'm sure Betty can tell you that the Hulk is capable of more than just rage. There's kindness, compassion, and so many other emotions within him. How is this supposed to help me get rid of him? Bruce asked, looking at Peter in confusion. Peter's shoulders slumped as he sighed. Honestly, Bruce. You're annoying. I can see why the Hulk doesn't like you. Wah, if you'd just let me talk without interrupting every few seconds, you'd know what I was planning, Peter said, irritation evident in his voice. Right, sorry, Bruce mumbled awkwardly, while Betty turned away, covering her mouth to hide a laugh. I'm not trying to get rid of the Hulk. I'm trying to help you learn to live with him, okay, so I see I'm wasting my time, for the love of God, Bruce, shut up. Peter snapped. Oh, Peter snapped, Felicia teased, clearly amused. I don't think I've ever seen him lose his cool like this before, MJ said, equally entertained. Peter hates it when someone interrupts him during an important explanation. It's one of his biggest pet peeves, Gwen added with a chuckle. Jesus Christ, Peter muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. Bruce, honey, you need to let him finish, Betty said, rubbing Bruce's back sympathetically. I know you're impatient, but we're not going anywhere if you don't let him explain. You're right. I'm sorry. Patience isn't one of my strong suits, Bruce admitted apologetically. I'm sorry for yelling. I shouldn't have done that. Just don't interrupt me again, Peter sighed, then cleared his throat. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, he said, giving Bruce a side eye, there's more to the Hulk than you understand. The Hulk is a part of you, a manifestation of all the anger you've bottled up over the years, given form by the gamma radiation. Whether you like it or not, the Hulk is a part of you. You just don't fully understand what he is yet. Peter continued, now, when people fear the unknown, the way to move past it is to understand it. The unknown becomes the known. Getting rid of the Hulk would be like getting rid of a part of yourself. And as a scientist, you should know that's not a good thing. The Hulk is your inner demon, so to speak, and the most effective way to deal with inner demons. You learn to live with them. Peter looked directly at Bruce. The only way to stop your suffering, to stop your fear, and to control the Hulk is to understand him. Once you do that, you can learn how to live with him. Bruce sat in silence, not saying a word. The awkward quiet stretched on, causing Peter to frown. Why aren't you saying anything? The last time I said something, you screamed at me. What are you, a child? I'm done explaining. I'm waiting for your input. Bruce sighed and leaned back in his seat. On paper, what you said sounds good, but I don't want to understand the Hulk. I just want him gone. And the Hulk doesn't seem like the type to cooperate. How can I understand him without putting people in danger? Honestly, Bruce, what other choice do you have? You've tried everything to get rid of him, and nothing's worked. This is literally your only option. And don't worry about communication. Back in my lab, we have a VR capsule we use for training. If we connect you to it, theoretically, both your consciousness and the Hulk's would be transported into a virtual world. You could talk, get to know each other. And if the Hulk goes on a rampage, we'll just create a simulation for him to destroy. Let him vent all his frustrations. You seriously have something like that? Bruce asked, surprised. Of course. After all, who's the smartest guy alive? Peter smirked, glancing at his friends. Reed Richards, they all said in unison. Come on. Where's the loyalty? I thought you guys were on my side. Peter said, feigning shock at their betrayal. Reed still holds the title. If you take it from him, we'll say you, Harry teased with a grin. You're all fake friends. Every single one of you, Peter grumbled. Suddenly, the ship jolted as they descended. Peter turned to Bruce. Look, we're back at our hideout. So, are you up for it or not? Bruce sighed deeply. Like you said, what other choice do I have? We all have to confront our demons at some point, right? Chapter 172, Third Person's POV. As the Weaver landed in the lab, Peter began walking backward with his arms spread wide. "Welcome to the spider cave," Peter said in a dramatic, deep voice, a huge grin on his face. Bruce and Betty stepped out of the jet, both wearing astonished expressions as they took in the vastness of the space. "Now that's what I call a grand debut if I do say so myself," Lizzie said, happily marching beside Harry. "Not yet," Peter called out, pointing a finger at her. "What now? What could I have possibly missed?" Lizzie asked in exasperation. "You missed jumping from the tallest building in the city. It's tradition. Just because you can fly doesn't mean you get to skip it. We did it, so you will too," Peter said with a smirk. Lizzie groaned. "You are so annoying." "Peter's right, Lizzie," Gwen chimed in. "He and I did it when we started, and we made those three do it too when it was their turn," she added with a grin. "Fine, I got it," Lizzie sighed, slumping her shoulders as Harry patted her back affectionately. Peter then turned to Bruce. "You ready to get started?" "No, but let's get this over with," Bruce replied with a sigh. As Gwen walked away, she discreetly pulled out a vial of blood she had collected for later study, intending to store it in refrigeration. Betty raised her hand slightly toward Peter. Confused, Peter gave her a high five. No, Betty laughed, "I just had a question." "You don't need to raise your hand. Go ahead and ask," Peter said, waving her off. "When Bruce goes into the VR world, could I follow him inside? You know, for emotional support." "I was planning on giving them a moment alone while we secretly spied from the outside," Peter teased, "but it's up to Bruce." Bruce pondered for a moment. "We don't know how safe this is, so it's better if I go in alone first. I need to talk to him one-on-one, without being spied on," Bruce said, giving Peter a pointed look. Peter grinned and gave him a thumbs up. "Don't worry, we'll respect your privacy." Behind Peter, Felicia and MJ exchanged amused looks as Peter crossed his fingers behind his back. "But before you go in, you'll need something to wear," Peter said, eyeing Bruce, who was struggling to keep his pants up. "Come with me." Peter led Bruce to a changing room and introduced him to the unstable molecule fiber suits. "Can I buy a couple of outfits made from this material?" Bruce asked. "Do you have any idea how much I've spent on clothes that rip every time I transform into the big guy?" "I'll have a set ready for you after your session," Peter promised, giving Bruce privacy to change. When Bruce emerged, he looked down at his new suit, impressed. "Wow, this feels great." Peter led him to the VR capsule room, where the others were waiting. Betty was running her hands over the capsules, her eyes wide with amazement. "These look straight out of a sci-fi movie. Pick whichever one looks the comfiest, and let us do the rest," Peter said, gesturing toward the capsules. Bruce sighed and glanced at Peter. "I'm trusting you with this. Don't let me down." Peter winked. "You can ask the ladies. Disappointment isn't really my thing." Bruce gave him a wary look. "He's going to kill me and everyone I love. I just know it." "Just get in," Peter ordered, his expression deadpan as Felicia and MJ slipped out of the room. Bruce opened the capsule, releasing a white mist. As he stepped inside, Peter signaled Betty to close the lid. As the capsule sealed shut, green liquid began filling the chamber. Betty and Bruce exchanged confused looks, prompting Peter to explain, "It's a nutrient solution to sustain your body if you stay inside for an extended period." They nodded in understanding, and soon, Bruce's eyes grew heavy, his consciousness slipping away. His eyelids fluttered shut, only to snap open again, glowing green. Peter froze momentarily before exhaling in relief as Bruce's eyes finally closed for good. Everyone else let out a collective breath they didn't realize they'd been holding. Felicia re-entered, carrying a stack of chairs, while MJ followed behind with a tray of snacks. "We brought food for the show," MJ announced, striking a playful pose like a waitress. "I thought we were respecting his privacy," Betty asked, her frown deepening. Peter sheepishly held up his crossed fingers. "I may have bent the rules a little." He handed her a chair. "You're welcome to leave if you want. No one's forcing you to stay." Betty hesitated for a moment before grabbing the chair. "And miss this?" "Not a chance," she said with a grin, her frown melting away. Arya, set the time dilation to 1:1 and show us what's going on inside, Peter ordered. Bruce's eyes fluttered open, finding himself in a vast, empty white space. As he scanned the room, he turned to see the Hulk, who mirrored his movements. They stared at each other for a tense moment. "So, you're him, huh?" "You're the Hulk," Bruce said, starting to walk in a slow circle, sizing up the towering green giant. Hulk began pacing as well, his eyes locked on Bruce. "You. Puny Banner." Hulk doesn't like Puny Banner. "Well, I can't say I'm a big fan of yours either," Bruce replied with obvious displeasure. "Puny Banner weak," Hulk rumbled. Bruce's irritation flared. "Can you stop calling me that? It's annoying." "No. Puny Banner is Puny Banner. Puny Banner weak, puny, pathetic. If I'm weak, then what does that make you?" Bruce shot back. "You're a part of me, aren't you? If I'm weak, then so are you." "No." Hulk bellowed, his voice booming. "Hulk is strongest. Hulk always saving Puny Banner. Puny Banner would be dead without Hulk. I never asked for your help. I never wanted you in my life." Bruce shouted, fists clenched. Hulk growled, stepping closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Bruce. "You think Hulk wants to be inside Puny Banner? Puny Banner always sad, always blaming Hulk for everything. Hulk is not problem, Puny Banner is." Bruce's voice rose. "You are literally the reason the military is hunting me. Every time you come out, I lose control and people end up dead. Roar. The Hulk let out an earth-shaking roar, blasting Bruce with a gust of hot air, his voice thundering through the white void. Bruce stood his ground, though his hair was blown back, hands bracing against the force. "Don't scream at Hulk." Hulk bellowed. "Hulk doesn't like being hunted either. Hulk just wants peace but isn't allowed. Hulk doesn't want to hurt people, but Hulk has to, or Hulk dies. And if Puny Banner dies, Hulk dies too. Hulk doesn't want to die. Hulk wants to live. What is wrong with Hulk wanting to live?" Bruce stood frozen, staring up at the Hulk, his heart pounding in shock at the sudden raw honesty in Hulk's words. "I never thought about it like that before. Have I been selfish? After the gamma radiation incident, my life isn't just mine anymore." Bruce took a deep breath, his voice softer now. "There's nothing wrong with wanting to live," he said, his tone almost conciliatory. "But you're out of control. There's no stopping you once you get angry or excited. I can't stay in one place for too long because the military will find me, then you'll come out, and more people will end up hurt, or worse." He glanced down, frustration evident in his posture. "Living with you isn't easy. I can feel you, always inside, just waiting to come out and destroy everything around me. You can call me weak or puny all you want, but I don't want to live a life where my existence causes nothing but pain and misery." Bruce's voice wavered as he continued. "I had to leave behind the most incredible woman, the woman I love, just to keep her safe from you. And now, I'm always running, never able to stop. That's not a life." Hulk's eyes narrowed, and he let out a low, almost contemplative rumble. "Hulk would never hurt Betty," he growled softly. "Hulk likes Betty. Betty is Hulk's friend." Bruce looked up at him, surprised. "Well, would you look at that, something we agree on. Never thought I'd see the day. I like Betty too." Back in the real world MJ wiped her eyes, her voice trembling slightly. "Whoa. I didn't think I was going to cry today." "Me neither," Felicia agreed, fanning her eyes carefully to avoid ruining her mascara. "Especially when Hulk said he just wants to live. I didn't expect him to have such deep emotions. It's really getting to me." "You're not the only one," Gwen added with a small smile, glancing toward Peter, who had a pensive frown on his face. Peter exhaled, then turned to Betty. "Would you look at that, looks like you're one of the main reasons Hulk and Bruce might actually learn to get along." Betty, blushing at Bruce's earlier words, smiled softly. Lizzie clasped her hands together excitedly. "Oh my God, that's so cute. The power of love solved everything. That's, like, so romantic." Betty's face flushed a deeper shade of pink as she realized how much Bruce had revealed about his feelings for her. Back in the virtual world, Bruce studied the Hulk for a moment longer, feeling an odd sense of calm settle over him. This towering, seemingly mindless force of rage had now shown a side Bruce had never considered before. Bruce glanced down at his hands, reflecting on the inner struggle that had consumed his life. Living with my own inner demons. Bruce let out a deep sigh, then looked back up at the Hulk. Why don't we start over, he suggested, his voice more sincere. Get to really know each other. You've been living inside of me for so many years, and this is the first time we've had a proper conversation. Hulk huffed, his breath heavy and filled with his usual frustration, but he let out a small growl of agreement. Fine, he rumbled, Hulk agrees. A smile crept onto Bruce's face as he extended his hand. Hello, I'm Bruce Banner. Hulk, after a brief pause, reached out and gripped Bruce's hand in his own massive one. Their eyes locked, green meeting brown as the Hulk spoke. Hulk is Hulk. Chapter 173, Third Person's POV, Date, May 12, 2035. Location, New York City. In a large mansion, a boy no older than 15 was doing push-ups in front of a mirror. He had striking blue eyes and silver hair, his toned body showcasing strength far beyond what any kid his age should possess. His face was set in a serious expression as he moved up and down, focused entirely on his workout. Suddenly, the door to his room burst open, revealing an older woman with long, wavy silver hair. She stood with one hand on her hip, looking at him sternly. Felix Parker, I know damn well you heard me. Get ready for school. You're already late, and your siblings have left you behind, she snapped. Sorry, I overslept and had to get my exercise in, Felix replied, not breaking his rhythm. 1. You always oversleep. You need a better excuse. And 2, I still don't understand why you work out, you have super strength. What's the point? It's not about getting stronger, Felix said, standing up and dusting off his hands. It's about discipline. By doing something pointless, I train myself to do the things that matter without complaining. You wouldn't understand. Whatever. Wash your hands and come eat. You might as well fill your stomach since you're already late, his mother replied with a sigh. Felix got ready quickly, throwing on a black leather jacket over a white shirt, with a silver chain hanging around his neck. He grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulder, making his way down the long corridor. With a grin, he slid down the stair railing, landing gracefully at the bottom. As he entered the kitchen, he found his mother setting a plate of breakfast for him. Felix reached for a waffle and waved it in her direction before trying to make a hasty exit. Unfortunately for him, his mother grabbed him and made him sit down. Eat properly, young man, she said, her sharp, feline-like eyes daring him to argue. All right, geez, he muttered, stuffing some food in his mouth. So, why didn't the others wait for me? You're really asking me that? You know how you oversleep. No one can wake you, and they're tired of waiting. I blame your genes for my sleeping problems. Yeah, keep telling yourself that, you big sleeping cat, she teased with a smirk. Once Felix finished eating, he stood to leave, but once again, his mother stopped him. With a sigh, he leaned toward her, his shoulders slumped. She grabbed his chin and kissed his cheek repeatedly. Bye, honey. Love you, she cooed. Love you too, he muttered, cheeks flushing red as he hurried out of the house. Watching him go, she smiled and picked up her phone. Call hubby. The phone rang briefly before a familiar voice answered on the other end. Hello, love. Hubby, he finally made it out of the house, she said with a chuckle. Ha. So it's that time, huh? I still remember it like it was yesterday. Of course you do, you've got an eidetic memory. Meanwhile, Felix was casually walking toward school. I don't get why the others always rush. I enjoy taking my time, his thoughts were interrupted when his watch beeped, and he groaned in annoyance. Ducking into a dark alley, he flipped it open, revealing a small holographic figure, a baby white tiger standing on its hind legs, arms crossed. We've got trouble, partner, the tiger cub said proudly. Felix sighed. This is New York City, the city of heroes. Why am I always the one getting called? Can't they get someone else? Sorry, but you and your siblings have a unique way of handling things, he's part of your rogue gallery. The Time Lord is back. Ugh, why did I get stuck with him? "He's so damn annoying," Felix muttered, leaping into the air and landing on a nearby rooftop. His sideburns began to grow, and his skin turned white. His teeth sharpened into fangs, claws extended from his fingertips, and his clothes shifted, seemingly absorbed into his body. He tossed his bag aside, dropped to all fours, and fully morphed into a white tiger with black markings and a long tail. His eyes, now tiger-like slits, crackled with electricity that spread across his entire body. "Time to go hunting," Felix growled as he bounded from rooftop to rooftop, leaving a blue trail of energy in his wake. Eventually, he started running through the air itself, defying gravity. When Felix arrived on the scene, he spotted an old man wearing a monocle, a green suit, and a top hat with a clock embedded in the center. The man was draining a green light from another person, who was rapidly aging as the Time Lord rejuvenated himself. Felix let out a powerful roar that froze the Time Lord in his tracks. The villain dropped the men and turned to face the charging white tiger. "Well, if it isn't the White Fang. I've absorbed enough temporal energy to make this interesting." The Time Lord made a hand sign, freezing time around him as he opened a portal behind himself and began to retreat. Despite the time freeze, White Fang moved effortlessly through it. "Winston, call Uncle Strange to help the guy," Felix commanded as he leapt through the slowly closing portal. On the other side, he found the Time Lord waiting for him. "As I thought, not even frozen time can stop you." "Where are we, Time Lord?" White Fang growled, eyes narrowing. The now youthful man spread his arms, gesturing to the liquid-like, gray surroundings. "Isn't it obvious? We're in the stream of time, our new battleground." Felix's claws crackled with blue electricity as he slashed at the air, sending arcs of plasma toward the Time Lord. The villain calmly held his top hat, freezing the attack midair. "Here's something you should know, young cub. In this place, I am the strongest. Here, surrounded by time itself, I reign supreme." Felix, in his White Fang form, glared at the Time Lord, feeling the weight of the temporal stream pressing around him. The eerie gray liquid that composed the flow of time rippled as the two adversaries faced off. Felix's plasma-charged claw marks hung suspended in midair, frozen by the distortions of time. The Time Lord chuckled, confidence radiating from his rejuvenated form. "You're impressive, cub. But in the stream of time, I see everything you will do before you even think of doing it. You can't win." Felix's fangs gleamed as he smirked. "Then I guess I'll have to stop thinking and start acting." Without warning, Felix lunged forward, claws glowing fiercely with plasma. The Time Lord raised his monocle, warping the space between them, slowing Felix's movements to a crawl. But Felix had been expecting this. Instead of fighting the distortion, he let his instincts guide him. His heightened senses, honed from years of training, allowed him to synchronize with the fluctuating flow of time itself. The Time Lord, expecting an easy victory, took a step back, ready to freeze Felix in place once more. But to his surprise, Felix blurred out of the distortion, phasing through the warped space. He appeared behind the Time Lord in an instant, claws sparking with electricity. "Surprise," Felix growled, slashing downward with a powerful strike. The Time Lord barely managed to conjure a temporal shield, blocking the plasma-infused claws. The force of the strike, however, caused cracks to form in the shield, and the Time Lord stumbled backward, eyes wide. You're disrupting time itself," the Time Lord gasped in disbelief. Felix landed gracefully, his eyes glowing with fierce determination. "You think you're the only one with tricks?" Before the Time Lord could recover, Felix pressed the attack, moving with blinding speed. He twisted through the air, dodging and weaving around the temporal distortions, as if he could see them before they formed. His tiger instincts allowed him to predict the changes in time, adapting faster than the Time Lord could react. Frustrated, the Time Lord slammed his hand into the stream, causing the surrounding gray liquid to ripple violently. "Enough," he bellowed. The time stream collapsed around Felix, bending past and future together, warping reality itself. Felix felt the crushing weight of centuries bearing down on him, memories and moments from countless timelines swirling around him like a chaotic storm. But he held his focus, claws crackling with energy. "You think I can't handle a few bad memories? I've seen worse." With a roar, Felix unleashed a burst of raw electrical energy, sending it surging through the time stream. The shockwave disrupted the Time Lord's control, sending ripples through the gray liquid. The Time Lord staggered, clutching his monocle as his hold on the time stream faltered. Felix saw his opening. In a flash, he pounced, claws glowing with charged plasma. With one decisive strike, he shattered the Time Lord's temporal shield and sent the villain flying backward into the liquid walls of the time stream. Not letting his enemy escape, Felix leapt after him, diving into the swirling stream. He swam through the gray liquid, trying to track the Time Lord, but soon lost sight of him. Before Felix could react, the time stream rejected him, spitting him out. Date: May 12, 2008. Location: New York City. In the shadows of a back alley in Times Square, a swirling temporal portal opened. Out of it shot a white tiger, tumbling toward the ground. Felix shifted in midair, landing gracefully on all fours before morphing back into his human form. Breathing heavily, Felix stood up and looked around, confused. He glanced down at his wrist and tapped his watch. "Winston, what just happened?" His AI companion's voice crackled to life. "You were ejected from the time stream. It appears you've been deposited at a random point in time." Felix's eyes widened. "What year?" "According to my investigation, the year is 2008, the year your father first became Spider-Man, and your mother started as Spider-Cat." Felix groaned, rubbing his face. "Oh no. Dad's gonna kill me." Chapter 174, Moving In, Third Person's POV. The hatch of the VR capsule opened, and out came Bruce, with both his and Hulk's consciousness back in his body. "So, how was it?" Peter asked, looking at Bruce with amusement. Bruce just stared at all of them sitting in chairs with a blank expression. "I'm sure you all already saw how it went. Come on, don't be like that. We want to hear your opinion," Peter continued to tease. "It honestly went better than I expected. It showed me a new perspective on things." "Thank you." "Truly," Bruce nodded graciously toward Peter. "Okay, now you're embarrassing me," Peter muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. Betty simply stood up and hugged Bruce. "If you ever need someone to talk to, or help processing how you feel, please come to me. I'd be more than happy to lend an ear." Bruce hugged her back, inhaling her scent. "Thank you. Get a room, you two. You've got people watching," Felicia scoffed in fake disgust as she picked up her chair and began leaving the room, with the others following behind her. Peter then walked alongside Bruce. "I think you saw pretty well how the Hulk is. He's no different than a child. He's your responsibility, Bruce. You'll need to teach him along the way." "I'll try, but it's easier said than done." "It might take years," Bruce muttered wearily. "Small steps, right?" Peter said confidently. "I suppose you're right. Right now, I feel like I just took a giant leap with the Hulk." "Hey, I know this might seem weird and random for me to bring up, but if you need a place to stay and hide out, why don't you stay here?" Peter asked. "Are you serious?" Bruce asked, looking at Peter strangely. I know, it's weird since we literally just met and I'm asking you to suddenly move in. But it beats constantly moving around and always being on the run. Not to mention, it's free," Peter nudged him. "I do like free things," Bruce muttered before sighing and shaking his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't do free. It feels like I'd be taking advantage of a kid. How about paying me back with your brain?" "Excuse me. You've only seen the tip of the iceberg of the things created here. For example, want to know what I use to power everything around here? A dual-sun core reactor." Bruce practically snapped his head toward Peter. "What? You managed to combine the theories of power from the core of a sun and a fusion reactor? Are you crazy? If that went wrong, it could have caused, wait, the VR world." Bruce immediately realized. "You're using the VR world to experiment before bringing your creations to life. That's really smart, genius, actually. It's the safest place to conduct experiments without any real consequences. Kid, your proposal just became a lot sweeter. So what, if I stay here, my rent will be my inventions and theories. You wouldn't steal them, would you? I can sign an NDA about everything I learn from you, if that'll make you feel better." Bruce stood and turned toward Peter. "I don't think that'll be necessary. You've shown me that you're someone I can trust. You're more than just a kid, you're a man with honor. I trust you completely. So, are you staying?" Bruce rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You're seriously making this harder than it needs to be. All right, I'll stay, but only until I find a secure place for myself. No, Peter said, shaking his head. Excuse me. That kind of thinking is why you'll end up single. It's not just a place for you anymore, it should be a place for you and Betty. She clearly cares about you. If you truly love her and are planning a future together, you should consult her and ask for her opinion too. Communication between partners is what keeps a relationship alive. So, don't make any major life-changing decisions without her. Bruce blinked, staring at Peter strangely. What? It's a bit disturbing how mature you are about everything. Peter walked with his hands behind his head. Well, I kinda have to be. The moment you choose to be a hero, your life isn't your own anymore. I'm responsible for the lives of a lot of people. A single mistake on my part could cause many deaths, so I have to be mature about a few things. Bruce patted Peter's back sympathetically. He's a really good kid. Bruce thought, and for the first time in a long while, he thought about the future. I hope that when I have kids, they turn out like him someday. Betty. Bruce decided to stay here, so that means you will too. If you guys are gonna have sex, make sure to clean up after yourselves. Peter yelled, cupping his hands over his mouth. Bruce stood still, staring at Peter. I take it back. I take it all back, he said, shaking his head in exasperation. Peter asked, tilting his head in confusion. Ha! Felicia laughed loudly, overhearing what Peter yelled. As things settled down, Peter and the others realized how late it had gotten. One by one, they began heading home, leaving only MJ, Peter, Bruce, and Betty behind. Peter then showed Bruce and Betty to their room. I'm not sure if you guys wanted one room or two. One is more than enough, Betty said before blushing, realizing how it sounded. Oh. Okay, like I said, if you guys are going to have sex, there's a washing machine down here so you can wash the sheets. Peter, please stop talking, Bruce pleaded. MJ soon returned, handing Peter 2 pens. Here. Thanks, Peter said before showing them to Bruce and Betty. These are for when you want to go out and stay undercover without being noticed. Peter held the pen to his face, and his appearance changed before returning to normal. Both Bruce and Betty were flabbergasted. Where the hell were you when I was running? Bruce teased as they both took the pens. Good night, and don't make too much noise, Peter teased. They promptly closed the door in his face, causing him to laugh in amusement. MJ shook her head in amusement. Come on, I think you've bothered them long enough. Are you sure? I still have a few extra teases left in me, Peter replied, reluctant to stop. MJ slowed her pace, letting Peter walk ahead before jumping onto his back. You can use them on me, she whispered close to his ear. You naughty, naughty girl. Peter murmured back, carrying her toward his indoor garage. After securing a helmet on her head, he started driving her home. MJ stood behind Peter on the motorcycle, her arms resting comfortably on his shoulders. So, are you staying over tonight? MJ asked curiously as they rode along. Is that even a question? Peter smirked, his eyes focused ahead. When they arrived at her house, MJ took off her helmet and kissed his cheek. I'll be waiting for you in my room. Be quick. Someone's impatient, Peter teased. He quickly got ready and sneaked over to her room, where he found MJ lounging in her underwear, posing provocatively with her head resting on her hand. She wiggled her fingers at him, beckoning him forward. Peter's eyes widened as he took in the sight. He tossed off his shirt and climbed into bed with her, grinning from ear to ear. The two playfully tossed each other around, giggling under the sheets. Their legs tangled together as MJ cradled Peter's face, kissing him repeatedly. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her face against his with a content smile. What are you doing? Peter asked, amused by her affectionate hold. Nothing, I just love you. I think this is what they call a sudden love surge. You're so cute and sweet, do you know that? Peter said, his heart swelling as he basked in her love. Or so I've heard, MJ replied, her smile brightening. She shifted on top of Peter, cupping his face as she kissed him deeply again, reigniting the spark between them. The next day, MJ and Peter were entwined together, both trembling as they reached their climax. MJ, on all fours, bit into her pillow to muffle her moans while Peter pressed against her, releasing everything he had. When they were done, they collapsed onto the bed, panting heavily and gasping for air. "We didn't get any sleep last night," MJ muttered, though her satisfied expression said otherwise. She sighed in mild annoyance. "Why do we always have to do it in my bed? I'm always the one who has to clean up." Peter chuckled, gently pulling her hair out of her face. "Well, my walls are thinner, we can't do it in the spider cave because, well, you know who is there, and you don't like public play." He grinned before adding, "I could reinforce my walls, make them soundproof. How about we try it at my place next time?" "That sounds good. Now let's get ready, you know, school and all," MJ said, rolling her eyes but smiling. Before leaving, Peter gave her one more kiss. "Love you. See you in a bit." After getting ready at his house, Peter joined Aunt May and Uncle Ben for breakfast. "Please come home for dinner once in a while. It gets lonely without you," Aunt May teased. "You're right. I'm sorry," Peter replied apologetically. But he froze as Uncle Ben switched on the news. Tony Stark, owner of Stark Industries, is reported missing after a deal gone wrong during his trip to Afghanistan. "It's starting," Peter thought excitedly, though he felt a pang of guilt. "I know I shouldn't be excited about the trauma he's going to experience, but I just can't help it." Both Aunt May and Uncle Ben stared at the news in surprise. Peter discreetly grabbed his phone and texted Arya, "Buy all of Stark Industries stocks when they hit rock bottom." Once he finished breakfast, Peter hugged Uncle Ben and kissed Aunt May on the cheek as an apology for missing dinners, then rushed out. He picked up MJ on his motorcycle before swinging by to get Gwen. All three arrived at school just as Harry pulled up on his bike, with Lizzie clinging to him from behind. Felicia soon arrived, glaring at Peter and Harry while flipping them both off. "Thanks for picking me up, guys. I really appreciate the walk," she said sarcastically. Peter and Harry laughed awkwardly as the group made their way to class. From afar, a boy with silver hair and striking blue eyes watched them with a small smile. "I thought you'd ride with Peter," Harry said, scratching the back of his head. "I had both Gwen and MJ with me. It wasn't my fault, but next time, I'll grab the car," Peter promised, joining his hands together and looking at Felicia apologetically. Felicia scoffed, ignoring them as she walked ahead. The group laughed and followed after her. When they sat down in class, the homeroom teacher entered and cleared his throat. "Settle down, class. I have a big announcement to make." Everyone glanced at the teacher curiously. "We have a transfer student joining us for a short while. Come on in and introduce yourself." The door opened, and a boy with silver hair and captivating blue eyes stepped into the room. He wore a leather jacket with a silver chain, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Sup. The name's Felix Pettersson," he said with a casual nod. Immediately, many of the girls were taken by him, while some of the boys grew envious. Felix glanced at Peter and his friends, noticing their lack of reactions. "Good. It looks like my ability to suppress my presence worked on their spidey senses," he thought with satisfaction. A smile crept across his face as he overheard Peter mutter, "Hey, Felicia, I think we found your long-lost twin brother." Chapter 175, Chapter 75, Relations, Third Person's POV. After his short introduction, Felix sat in the back of the class and immediately fell asleep. The class turned toward him in surprise as they heard him begin to snore. "He's got guts, I'll give him that," Flash remarked, glancing back at Felix. Harry leaned toward Felicia and whispered, "Do you think he might be related to you?" Felicia rolled her eyes. "Not every guy with silver platinum blonde hair is related to me. Plus, he's got blue eyes. As far as I know, no one in my family has blue eyes." Peter leaned over to Gwen and, in a voice only she could hear, asked, "Did you pick up anything unusual about him?" "No, did you?" Gwen replied, eyeing Peter as he shook his head. Deciding it wasn't worth overthinking, they all shrugged it off, assuming Felix was just a normal kid. The class carried on, though the occasional snore from the back row made some of the girls glance back to check him out. Before long, the bell rang, signaling the end of the class. "Don't forget, everyone, parent-teacher conferences are at the end of the week. Make sure to tell your parents, the teacher called out as students began to pack up. As everyone started to leave, they noticed Peter lingering behind, checking his watch. What are you waiting for? Harry asked, confused. Peter simply raised a finger, signaling them to wait. Moments later, when the hallways emptied out, Felix finally left the classroom, blending in with the crowd. As soon as he did, Peter swiftly grabbed him by the ear and dragged him away with a serious expression. Peter. What the hell are you doing? His friends asked, staring at him in shock. Dad. I'm sorry. Stop pulling my ear, it's like you know my weak spot. Felix pleaded in pain as Peter dragged him toward a secluded staircase. Everyone froze, mouths agape. Dad. Peter finally set Felix down on the stairs, arms crossed. Talk. Now. They all stood there, looking between Peter and Felix, utterly stunned. Dad, they repeated, still processing what they had just heard. Gwen pushed through the group, gripping Felix by the shoulders. Who's your mother? Felix nervously glanced at Felicia, then awkwardly turned back to Gwen. Hi, Mama Gwen. Everyone immediately snapped their heads toward Felicia, who pointed at herself in disbelief. Me. Like I said, talk. Now, Peter repeated firmly. Whoa, wait. Peter, why are you being so aggressive? MJ asked, her eyes filled with concern. Peter sighed, his voice heavy with worry. If a kid of mine shows up from the future, that can only mean two things, and neither of them are good. Either the future is falling apart and he's here to fix it, or someone important dies and I end up a shell of a man, failing as a father. It's nothing like that, Felix interrupted, rubbing the back of his head. I'm here by accident. Peter's shoulders sagged in relief. Jesus Christ, you scared the life out of me. I thought you said you didn't detect anything unusual, Gwen said, looking at Peter quizzically. Well, that's half true, Peter explained. My spidey senses aren't flaring up, but I can sense his life force, though faintly. It's probably some kind of technique. His bioelectricity is similar to mine, but different. And those eyes, they're like mine when I use my electricity, but his seem to be permanently charged. Peter then smirked. And seriously, Pedersen. You couldn't come up with a less obvious last name. Suddenly, a voice emerged from Felix's hand. Told you that name would give you away. Not now, Winston, Felix muttered. I thought it was funny at the time. Felicia, still in shock, exclaimed, Wait, can we go back to the part where I'm his mother? Felix sighed. Yes, you're my mother, the one who birthed me. There's Mama Gwen, Mama MJ, Uncle Harry, Aunt Lizzie, and of course, dear old Dad. He addressed them each in turn, offering a two-finger salute. Felicia clasped a hand over her mouth. Holy shit. Gwen shot Peter a sharp look. Nice going. Gwen honey, quite literally not my fault this time, Peter sighed. Felix then turned back to Peter. Do I still have to do your test? Because I really don't want to. The others looked at Felix in confusion, but Peter's face lit up with a grin. Oh yeah, you're doing it. Test. What test? Gwen asked, curiosity piqued. Without a word, Felix removed his jacket, sighed, and assumed a martial arts stance. Peter followed suit. Wait, are they about to fight? Here. Lizzie asked, bewildered. Both Peter and Felix locked eyes, their spidey senses crashing into each other. In that moment, they saw visions of their future selves, locked in intense battle. Their movements became synchronized as they mentally countered and engaged, each predicting the other's attacks with deadly precision. From the outside, it looked like Peter and Felix were standing completely still, though their fingers and muscles were twitching ever so slightly. Sweat began to bead on their foreheads, and for a moment, Peter's expression flickered with surprise. But it was clear neither of them was done yet. What the hell is going on? Felicia asked, confused. Suddenly, Felix slammed his jacket to the ground in frustration. God damn it, he yelled, while Peter pumped his fist in the air in victory. That's BS, and you know it. Felix snapped. I'm from the future. I should be stronger than you. You played dirty, old man. Harry raised an eyebrow. So, care to fill us in on what just happened? Peter smirked, brushing imaginary dust off his shoulders. It was a test I came up with just in case a kid claiming to be mine from the future ever showed up. It's like mental boxing, using our spidey sense to predict each other's moves and counterattack. Only my real kid would be able to keep up. With a proud smile, Peter ruffled Felix's hair. He's legit. He's my kid, all right. Felix batted his hand away, embarrassed. Don't do that. Lizzie shook her head in disbelief. Am I the only one freaked out that he's from the future? Felicia blushed, crossing her arms. How do you think I feel? He's supposed to be our kid, with Peter. Peter's expression shifted as he looked seriously at Felix. I know you're not supposed to reveal much about the future, but I need to ask. Am I a good father? Everyone turned to Peter in surprise, even Felix seemed taken aback by the question. Really? Out of everything you could ask me about the future, that's what you choose? Peter's gaze held an unusual vulnerability, and Felix softened. You're serious, huh? He paused, then nodded reassuringly. Yeah, you're a great dad. We all see how much effort you put into being there for us. Peter exhaled, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. That's always been one of my biggest fears, he thought, being a bad father. Harry, curious, spoke up. So, how did you end up here? Felix sighed and flicked open his watch, revealing a hologram of the Time Lord. The Time Lord, he's part of my rogues gallery. I followed him after he opened a portal to the time stream. I was winning the fight and almost had him, but he threw himself in, and I followed. I ended up here, but I don't know where he is now, or when he'll appear. Until then, I'm stuck. So, I did what I was taught, came to you for help. They all heard Gwen mutter under her breath, why couldn't it have been my kid that came from the future? Ignoring her, Felix continued, I tried accessing the satellite until I realized it hasn't been built yet, which makes everything a lot more complicated. Is the Time Lord already here? Harry asked. Felix shrugged. That's the thing with time, it's tricky. We might have exited the time stream at different points, so I don't know if he's already here or when he'll show up. He then lifted up his hand, revealing Peter's watch. Hey, big sis, can you work with Winston here to see if you detected anything unusual? Peter blinked in surprise. Wait, how did you even take that without me noticing? Felix smirked. A skill Mom taught me. Felicia puffed out her chest proudly. He's definitely my son. As the others stared at Felicia, a hologram of Arya, Peter's AI, appeared. She smirked, pretending to pat Felix on the head. Don't worry, kiddo. Big sis has got your back. Felix gave her a weirded out look. Wow, you're tiny and adorable. MJ, hesitating, pressed her fingers together shyly. Peter and I have kids in the future too. Felix smiled, holding up 4 fingers. Yeah, 4 so far. Everyone stared at Felix in shock before turning to MJ and Peter. MJ blushed, covering her face in embarrassment. Harry grinned. Damn, you two are gonna be busy in the future. Peter waved a hand. All right, enough. The more you say, the more you risk messing with the timeline. Felix nodded, tossing Arya back to Peter. Fair enough. I've got class to get to, anyway. He walked off with a peace sign over his shoulder, leaving the group still reeling from the revelation. Chapter 176, Teasing, Third Person's POV. It was soon lunchtime, and Peter, along with the others, including Felix, were sitting at the top of the empty football bleachers. So, what am I like in the future? Felicia asked, looking at Felix with hopeful eyes and an excited smile. Felix leaned forward, resting his arms on his legs and covering his face with one hand. Smothering. If I had to describe you in the future, that's the word I'd use. Okay, is that the good kind or the bad kind? Felix sighed. I thought I wasn't supposed to answer questions about the future. Am I a bad mother? Felicia asked sadly, noticing Felix's hesitation. Don't worry, honey. Our son here is just too shy and loves you too much to answer that question, Peter said teasingly. Ah. Is that right? Honey? Gwen asked with a raised eyebrow, while MJ gave Peter a curious look. I'm just joking, Peter said, raising his hands in surrender. I'm curious, Harry interjected, if Peter and MJ have 4 kids in total, how many kids does Peter have in all? Do not answer that question, Peter said, his tone serious. Relax, old man, I wasn't going to, Felix retorted. We're the same age, don't even go there, Peter said, rolling his eyes. Peter then turned to Felix with confusion. During our little mental sparring match, I saw that you could turn into a tiger. What's that about? I thought you'd have spider powers. I do, Felix said, showing Peter his wrist with the spinnerets. I have 2 sets of powers. In my human form, I have all the powers of a spider. When I transform into a white tiger, I lose those powers. That's so cool, Felicia muttered, causing Felix to smile to himself. I would have loved to see her reaction if I said I gained those powers because of her, Felix thought with a smirk. Gwen leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, staring at Felix, making him feel awkward. Yes, Mama Gwen. Felix asked. Don't call me that. Sorry. Tell me honestly, do I really accept the concept of a harem with Peter, and am I not just miserable? Am I like that vindictive stepmother who makes your life hell? I'm calling you Mama Gwen affectionately, aren't I? I suppose you're right. Gwen mumbled. I'm still not liking this. In fact, I hate it. I can tell. Sorry. Gwen sighed. It's not your fault. It's his, she said, glaring at Peter. I'm sorry for being so attractive, it's a sin I'll spend my entire life trying to correct, Peter said dramatically, as if he were the victim. This earned him a smack on the shoulder from both Gwen and MJ. It's nice to see your narcissistic behavior is still present in the past, Felix muttered in annoyance. Harry looked at Felix with a raised brow. He doesn't change in the future. Felix rolled his eyes. He won't shut up about how our good looks come from him. Peter pointed a finger at him. And don't you forget it. MJ, resting her chin on her hand with one leg over the other, smiled as she thought, even though he sounds annoyed, he seems to care deeply for Peter. I can feel the love and pride he has for him. She then looked at Peter, thinking he really will be a great father. And couldn't help but blush slightly. So, have you gotten laid yet? MJ put her hand over her face. He always ruins the moment. Peter, they all shouted. Come on, Dad. Felix mumbled, blushing. Seeing as you're blushing, you haven't, coward. I'm blushing because my dumbass of a father asked me that with my mother right next to me. I'm not talking about my sex life with you. Felicia scoffed. It's good to know you didn't inherit his shamelessness. Yeah, all of that went to my sister, which I shouldn't have mentioned. Damn it. As in, I have another child besides you? Felicia asked, pointing to herself. Felix zipped his mouth. Can we change the topic to something that doesn't involve the future? Well, I have a question that kind of relates to the future and kind of doesn't, Peter said. I'm sure that if you're really from the future, I would have cracked time travel by then. So why hasn't he? I appeared and taken you away before you could cause any damage. It's because of the rule you set for us, which our mothers hate. You believe in us having our own adventures, taking our own risks, and figuring things out for ourselves. You would only involve yourself if we personally ask you to, otherwise, you give us space to learn at our own pace. If I needed help, my father, future you, would have expected me to build a time machine communicator to contact him and get help. That sounds horrible, Lizzie said. I can see why you said we hate it, Gwen muttered. Yeah, I really don't like that. It sounds dangerous, Felicia said, looking at Peter with an unpleasant expression. That seems like something I would totally do, Peter nodded. Do you understand why I'm like that? Yeah, don't worry, we all know. It's one of the reasons I said you're a good father. You have complete faith and confidence in us. Although those expectations can weigh a ton, we all have super strength, Felix smirked confidently at the end. Peter leaned toward Harry and whispered, I bet you $20 he thought he looked cool when he said that last line. I take it all back. You are a horrible father who enjoys all of our misery with your teasing, Felix said, his expression deadpan. So, what are your plans while you wait for the Time Lord to show up? Felicia asked, steering the conversation to a different topic. I honestly don't know. I stayed in a hotel last night, but I can't stay there forever. My allowance doesn't really work here since I could mess up the economy by bringing money from the future. I had Winston take some cash from bad guys, but not too much, because if I take too much, it could affect the future in ways I wouldn't be able to undo, Felix explained. Why don't you stay with me, then? Felicia asked hopefully. Or he could stay at the hideout. We've got rooms, and that way, you don't have to explain to your mom why there's a random boy who looks kinda like you in your room, Peter scoffed. Oh. I just wanted to get to know him better, since he's, you know, my son. Then tell your mom you're having a sleepover with either Gwen or MJ and stay the night at the hideout with him, Peter suggested. Oh, that's a good idea. Felicia nodded, clearly liking it. Unfortunately, before she could ask Felix more questions, the bell rang, signaling that they had to continue with their school day. As they headed toward class, Gwen pulled Peter aside, letting the others go ahead. Once they were out of earshot, Gwen looked at Peter sadly. I honestly hate this. What's wrong? Peter asked, concern in his voice. Gwen rested her forehead against Peter's chest. I feel like the choice was taken away from me. Peter hugged her, and she returned the embrace. Of course you're going to feel sad and like something was taken from you if you look at it that way. But maybe seeing him was the answer you needed, the answer to your doubts. Didn't you say you were thinking about it? Gwen remained silent, so Peter continued, his presence just means you already came to that conclusion. And you saw how he looked at us, how he called us. There was no anger, only love. He even called you Mama Gwen affectionately, even though you're not his mother. Gwen looked up at him. Your words are very manipulative. Ugh. I really didn't mean for them to come out like that. I'm just happy. Of course you are. Your dream of a harem is coming true, Gwen replied, her expression flat. Or the dream of a big family, Peter countered, reminding her of their conversation on the Ferris wheel. I still feel like the choice was taken away from me. Gwen muttered. Peter gently brushed her hair away from her face. Is there anything I can do to make you feel better? Gwen studied his face, trying to discern if Peter was manipulating her. But no matter how she tried to see it, all she saw was concern for her and how she was feeling in his gaze. He isn't trying to manipulate me into making sure his harem thing works out. He's just genuinely concerned about me. Maybe a kiss will help for now. Gwen said, her lips forming a slight pout. Peter raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's what you want? Don't you? Without another word, Peter kissed her, making Gwen close her eyes and rise slightly onto her tiptoes as she leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Get to class. Stop making out in the hallways, one of the patrolling teachers yelled, causing them both to blush and quickly run back to class. Chapter 177, Flash and Peter, Third Person's POV. Gym class was the last period of the day, and they were all jogging in their school gym uniforms. Peter and the others soon noticed more eyes on them than usual, likely thanks to the new addition running alongside them. So, do you get everyone's attention like this back where you're from? Peter asked, amused. Yeah. It's a hassle. What hurts more is having to turn down some of the girls. When I say no, they always look hurt, which I hate doing. Peter and Harry exchanged straight-faced looks. Then they all heard MJ's voice in their heads, except for Harry and Lizzie. Looks like future you raised him right, Felicia, MJ teased. Felicia smiled proudly, her ponytail swaying as she ran. Wait, do you even have a girlfriend? Harry asked curiously. I'm working on it. Felix muttered. They all looked at Felix strangely, surprised that someone with his good looks didn't already have a girlfriend. Just then, Flash jogged by. How do you do it, Parker? Do what? Peter asked, raising an eyebrow. How do you always manage to befriend the new kids so fast? First Felicia, now him. Peter turned around and started jogging backward, smirking with his fingers on his chin. Because I'm hella charming, can't you tell? Flash scoffed, rolling his eyes. It's probably just because you hang out with the cute girls. Felix looked a bit disgusted but hid it well. Nope, they don't interest me in the slightest. Everyone stopped talking and stared at Felix in silence. He looked at them, confused, until his eyes widened in realization, too late, as he saw Peter's grin growing. It's all right, we support you, Peter said, putting a hand on Felix's shoulder. I didn't know you swung that way, Harry teased. We're not here to judge, Felicia chimed in with a smile. She's right. If anyone gives you a hard time about it, come to me, Flash said, proudly pointing to himself. Felix's eye twitched as Peter's cheeks turned red, suppressing laughter. I'm not gay, Felix said flatly. Really? Bummer. Flash said. The group's attention shifted to Flash. Peter patted him on the back. So you finally came out. I thought it would take longer. That's not what I meant. I just meant it's a bummer because if he were gay, he wouldn't be competition for the girls. Huh? You're really not gay? MJ asked in genuine surprise. Why are you so surprised? Flash asked, astonished. Well. You were so obsessed with Peter that I thought, maybe you secretly had feelings for him but were too afraid to admit it, MJ blushed as she explained. Gwen and Harry burst out laughing. Flash stared at MJ in disbelief. Is that seriously what you thought of me this whole time? Can you blame me? You were always so intense with Peter. It seemed like one of those stereotypical, secretly in love jock stories, where you bully the nerd because you're secretly in love with him, MJ explained. Now it was MJ's turn to receive weird looks, even Peter was looking at her strangely. Tell me honestly, did you create a whole narrative about me and Flash? MJ blushed and muttered, no comment. Although my delusions didn't go as far as MJ's, I also found your obsession with Peter a bit weird, Gwen admitted. Flash fell unnaturally quiet, raising a few brows, until he finally sighed and admitted, I was jealous of him. Their eyes widened in shock at Flash's confession. You were. I mean, I'd be jealous of me too, just look at me, Peter said, masking his surprise with a bit of narcissism. Yeah. I'm not afraid to admit it anymore. I was jealous of Parker. He had good grades, was smart, had a beautiful girlfriend, and always seemed genuinely happy. I was jealous, so I bullied him to make him as miserable as the rest of us. They all stared at Flash, unsure how to respond. Peter was left speechless. What changed? Felix asked, smiling curiously. Well, it was mostly after he helped Felicia. I started to respect him. It's hard to bully someone you respect. And I'm going to go die of embarrassment for saying all of this out loud, Flash said, sprinting away, blushing furiously. There was a tense, heavy silence in the group. If anyone's freaked out or weirded out by what just happened, raise your hand, Peter said, raising his hand. The others followed suit as they watched Flash's retreating figure. Help you? Felix asked curiously, glancing at Felicia. He had never been told about any of this by his parents. You don't know? Gwen asked, a bit surprised. If I did, I wouldn't be asking. So, what happened? Felix replied. No, Peter interjected firmly. Felix looked at Peter in confusion. What does he mean by no? Picking up on his confusion, Peter explained, we'll explain later. It's not a story to share in public. Plus, it's her story. If Felicia wants to tell you, she will. If she doesn't, well, too bad. Felix nodded in understanding just as a sharp whistle blew, causing Peter, Gwen, and Felix to wince slightly. After the gym exercise, they were free to roam for the rest of the period. Peter grabbed a basketball and, in a low voice only someone with super hearing could catch, said, "Want to play ball with your old man?" Felix rolled his eyes. How are you not embarrassed saying stuff like that? I get it if you don't want to. You probably don't want to get cooked in front of everyone on your first day, Peter teased with a grin. You're annoying. Felix muttered as he walked over to Peter. The others stood a little further away, watching the interaction. Is it just me, or does Peter seem happier? If that makes sense. Harry asked, tilting his head in confusion. It's honestly nice to see, MJ said with a warm smile as she watched Peter toss the ball to Felix, who tossed it right back. Peter then started dribbling the ball, his hands moving quickly and effortlessly. Peter rapidly bounced the ball between his legs, behind his back, and back again, while Felix crouched slightly, ready in a defensive stance. Gwen leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silently watching the game with a thoughtful look on her face. Meanwhile, Felicia stood nearby, lost in her own thoughts. So Peter and I really. This is seriously forcing me to confront these feelings I didn't want to. I was in denial, and I wanted it to stay that way. Damn it, it was just a small interest, nothing more, and I was planning on getting rid of these feelings. But then, boom, Sun from the future shows up. Maybe it's a sign from the universe telling me not to suppress these feelings. MJ glanced at Felicia, sensing her uncertainty. She debated whether to step in or let Felicia figure things out on her own. After a moment, MJ decided to give her space to sort through her thoughts without outside influence. Peter, do I love Peter? Felicia thought, frustrated. No. I don't, but damn it, I really like him. Even after knowing him for just a few months, I can tell he's amazing. He's crazy smart, honorable, kind, strong, handsome, and hilarious. Honestly, he's like the perfect guy. But he's already dating Gwen and MJ. And I'm selfish, really selfish. If I want something, I want it for myself. But that's not possible with Peter. It's also why I'm put off by him. If I could steal him for myself, it would have been so much easier. But it's impossible, he loves Gwen and MJ too much to be stolen. And that's another thing that makes him great. Ugh, this is so conflicting. Felicia thought, scratching her head in frustration. On the court, Felix guarded Peter tightly, making it hard for him to move effectively. Every time Peter feigned a move, Felix didn't fall for it. Smirking, Felix said, "Want to know something about the future? All of our moms divorce you." What? Peter began, caught off guard. Taking advantage of Peter's surprise, Felix snatched the ball from his hands, spun around him, and sprinted toward the hoop, the ball bouncing confidently between his hands. Realizing he'd been tricked, Peter chased after him, but Felix was already in the air, dunking the ball into the net. He hung from the rim with one hand, sticking his tongue out at Peter. Just kidding, he jumped down and patted Peter's shoulder. "You're gonna need to work on your mental game, old man." Peter narrowed his eyes playfully. "Just wait till you're born." "What?" Felix asked, suddenly alarmed. "What's that supposed to mean?" After gym class, it was time to head home, well, for some of them. Others had jobs or internships to get to. Peter and Gwen, unfortunately, had their internship to attend. "Should we walk?" Peter asked Gwen, who nodded in agreement. "Here," Peter said, tossing Felix the keys to his bike. "I don't think I need to tell you where to go, do I?" "Nah, I got it." "But where are you going?" Felix asked curiously. "Internship," Peter replied. With the Fantastic Four, Felix rapidly slapped a hand over his mouth, eyes wide in panic. "The who now?" Gwen asked, looking confused. Peter just rubbed the bridge of his nose and sighed heavily. "No one," Felix muttered hastily, hopping on the bike and motioning for his mother, Felicia, to join him. As soon as she was on, Felix sped off, trying to escape the mess he'd accidentally stirred up. Chapter 178, Daily Bugle, Third Person's POV. Peter and Gwen were walking toward their internship when a fire truck sped past them with its sirens blaring. Both of them sighed, shoulders slumping. "We're going to be late, aren't we?" Gwen asked. "I'll call ahead and let them know," Peter said, taking out his phone. They both ran after the fire truck, ducking into an alley, where they threw their bags against the wall and webbed them up before tapping their watches. Between two buildings, both Spider-Man and Ghost Spider leaped into the air, swinging away, with Spider-Man holding his phone to his ear. "Peter. Is something the matter?" Reed Richards asked. "Yeah, we're going to be a few minutes late. You know, New York traffic." Don't worry, take your time." "Thanks for letting me know," Reed said before hanging up. Spider-Man turned to Ghost Spider and gave her a thumbs up. "Don't worry, he doesn't suspect a thing." Meanwhile, MJ walked into an alley, tossing her backpack high into the air before tapping her watch and jumping after it. When Scarlet Spider appeared midair, she webbed her backpack to her and began swinging toward her internship, stopping to handle a few petty crimes along the way. She dove into another dark alley, landing in a roll and tapping her watch, transforming back into MJ as she ran toward the Daily Bugle. "Hey, Betty." MJ greeted as she passed by, heading to Jameson's office. "Hello to you too, Ms. Watson," Betty replied, shaking her head with a smile. Inside the office, MJ found Jameson alone, writing something down. "Ah, if it isn't my favorite photographer. I got the pictures you sent to Betty yesterday of those green monsters in Harlem. Good work. Even on your days off, you're working. You'll go far, young lass." "So listen, I had this idea. Why don't we open an online page for the Daily Bugle?" "Why the hell would I do that?" Jameson asked, giving MJ a strange look. "So we can double the profit, obviously." Jameson narrowed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening, but that's only because I like you. So make it worth my while. No offense, but it's mostly older folks who read the newspaper. The Daily Bugle is all about spreading the word, right? But kids my age, they get all their info online. Nobody reads the paper anymore. Spreading the word is fine, but how does that make us money?" Jameson scoffed, unconvinced. "Two things," MJ said, raising two fingers. "Viewership and advertisements. With ads, the companies would pay us based on the number of people who see them. Say the rate is 1 cent per view. If 1 million people visit our online page, that's $10,000 in ad revenue. Even if only 100,000 people see it, that's still $1,000, on top of whatever we make from selling physical copies." Jameson removed the cigar from his mouth and leaned further back in his chair. "You're a smart kid. So what do you want? You didn't tell me this out of the kindness of your heart." "I want two things, to run the online side of the Bugle, and a 50-50th split." "And why would I agree to that?" Jameson said, snuffing out his cigar angrily. "Because it was my idea." MJ rolled her eyes. "I'll set up the site, well, not me, but I know someone who can get it up and running today." Jameson interlocked his fingers. "And what's stopping me from stealing your idea and making it my own? It's a brilliant idea. There's no way a high school girl came up with it." MJ smiled and ran her hand over her watch. "Gee, I wonder how the media would react to the owner of a major media company taking advantage of his high school intern." "I never touched you," Jameson yelled, slamming his desk in anger. "I didn't mean that kind of advantage, you sick perv," MJ retorted. "Oh." Jameson blinked, sitting back down, confused. MJ pushed her watch forward. "I meant I'm recording this conversation. So if you steal my idea, I can just post it online. A scandal like that wouldn't be good for business. I'd hate to see such a fine establishment crumble." "Are you threatening and blackmailing me?" Jameson asked, narrowing his eyes. "Puffed, me. Never. I'm just protecting myself from a scary corporate man. Can you stop wording things so weirdly?" "Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. Look, it's just insurance for my interests. As a businessman, I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from." Jameson narrowed his eyes. "You know, I meant it when I said you're smart. The problem is, you're too smart. That's going to get you into trouble someday. So, do we have a deal? I can't make you the owner of the website, but I can make you a reporter for them. As for the cut, 80 out of 20. 50-50ths. Jameson grumbled, 75 out of 25. 50-50ths. 70-30ths. 50-50ths. Do not test my goodwill, Jameson said, narrowing his eyes. MJ just smiled and mouthed the words, 50-50ths. 55-45ths is the highest I'm going to go. Deal. Jameson froze, eyeing her suspiciously. Being a reporter and getting 55 of 45 was your original goal all along, wasn't it? MJ smiled and shrugged. I'm too inexperienced and young to properly manage the website. My dream was always to be a reporter. I'm just starting small so I can build experience. If you want to give me a raise in the future, well, I'm not going to turn it down. She shrugged again. So, I've been played, huh? Jameson asked with an unpleasant expression. I get underestimated because of my age and gender, so I just use that to my advantage. You're not to blame, MJ said with a smile and a gesture that read, what can I say? Jameson scoffed and shooed her away. Go to Betty and get your money for yesterday's photos. The contract will be ready for you when that website's up. MJ made an OK sign with her hand. You should have the contract ready for tomorrow. I've had someone working on the site for a while now, and they said it'll be done by then. Jameson stared at her for a bit. Just get out of my office. Okie dokie. MJ saluted as she skipped toward the exit. Jameson scoffed, turning his back to her, but a proud smirk grew across his face as he stared out the window. As MJ stepped out of the office and closed the door behind her, she began to dance. Jackpot, baby, she said, swinging her arms and pumping her fist while shifting her legs. Snap. Ha ha ha, someone looks happy. MJ froze, hearing the sound of a camera shutter. Her eyes popped open, and she saw Eddie laughing with a camera in hand, looking amused. MJ didn't care, though. She wasn't camera shy and held up two peace signs like gang signs with duck lips. Guess who just got a promotion? Eddie froze. Are you serious? I wouldn't be celebrating if I wasn't, MJ replied as she happily walked toward Betty, who handed her an envelope. Eddie scoffed. Since you're getting paid more, you can take me out to lunch. Ha. The best I can do for you is a hot dog from the corner stand, she said, snapping her fingers and waving her envelope as she walked away. Better than nothing, I guess. Eddie smiled before heading inside. Felix and Felicia soon arrived at the hideout, where Aria gave them access. Felix scoffed, looking around with a smile. So, this is what the old hideout was like. When they said an abandoned subway station, they weren't kidding. Does this hideout not exist in the future or something? Felicia asked. It does, but it was remodeled before I was born and passed down to my firstborn older brother, Felix replied with a smile. Question, among all of Peter's kids, where do you fit in? Felicia asked. I'm the youngest, Felix said, scratching his cheek. Eh? Really? As they entered the hideout, they found Bruce and Betty about to head out. Felix tilted his head in confusion. Uncle Bruce. Aunt Betty. What? Betty asked, tilting her head in confusion. Uncle. Bruce asked, looking at Felix weirdly and tilting his head. Ah, right. Felix muttered in realization. Sorry about him, he's from the future, so don't worry, Felicia sighed. What? They both shouted as Felix awkwardly rubbed the back of his head. The foo, yes. As in the foo, yes. Felicia sighed. She then turned to Felix. Do you call everyone uncle and aunt? Felix looked up and sighed. It's not my fault. Blame my overly friendly father who makes friends with literally anyone he meets. I have so many aunts and uncles, I couldn't count them even if we used all our fingers and toes. Bruce and Betty were still reeling from the fact that Felix was from the future. Bruce glanced between Felicia and Felix. I can see the resemblance, but they could just be related. He muttered. And who's your father? Bruce asked curiously. Take a wild guess, Felix sighed. Peters, huh? I can kinda see it. Holy, you might really be from the future. That's insane, Bruce said, amazed. How far into the future are you from? Betty asked curiously, clearly excited to be meeting someone from the future. 2035, oh wow. I would be an old man by that time. Bruce said, I'm 66 years old from where you're from, isn't your presence here affecting the future? Bruce stopped and asked with concern. Felix sighed, that's what I'm about to find out, and how are you going to do that? Felicia asked curiously. Felix sighed once more, I'm going to call my dad, from the time where I'm from. I might not look like it, but I'm worried if I may have damaged the future with the words I'm saying. Chapter 179, Dilf Peter third person's POV, you're going to do what now? Felicia asked, surprised but increasingly eager to see what future Peter might look like. Betty, equally intrigued, added, we were planning to head out, but now I have to see this. Felix sighed, glancing around. Where's the kitchen? Never mind, I can smell it from here. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a microwave and a blender, much to everyone's confusion. This would be easier with Aunt Lizzie's equipment and power, but since she's not here, we'll have to make do, he said, setting the appliances down. Bruce raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you doing? I'm going to use the microwave's radiation to manipulate gravity in the blender to help create a rotating field, Felix explained, starting to tinker with both appliances. That should bend light and sound back into themselves, allowing us to carry both faster than their natural speed. Bruce nodded thoughtfully. You're accelerating light and sound to communicate across time. Interesting, but how are you going to connect with your dad in the future? Felix took off his watch, holding it up for everyone to see. This. I'll use quantum entanglement to link my watch with my dad's watch in the future. Wait, what's quantum entanglement? Felicia asked, looking a bit lost. Felix smiled and explained, it's when two particles, or in this case, two devices, become linked in such a way that, no matter how far apart they are, whether across space or time, changes to one instantly affect the other. It's like a bridge between the present and future. Fascinating. Bruce muttered, feeling really glad he chose to stay. Arya, I need you to focus most of the power source of the base into this, Felix said as he connected his watch to the contraption he'd made. The microwave began to glow hotter while the blender started to rotate at an unnatural speed. Winston, call my father, Felix instructed. A hologram projection appeared above the watch. Calling, my personal piggy bank. Winston's voice echoed. They all slowly turned towards Felix, who was hiding his face. Felicia had an amused expression as the hologram began to glitch. After a moment of static, a face started to materialize. It was a man, handsome, with long brown hair reaching his chin, a strong, thick beard matching his hair, and deep hazel eyes. He was wearing a black muscle shirt with jeans, lounging in a wooden chair with a glass of scotch in hand. Felicia covered her mouth in surprise. Bruce and Betty weren't much different, both looking amazed for different reasons. Whoa. Betty muttered, causing Bruce to snap his head toward her. Felix. Father. Need me to come get you? Nope. Then bye. And just like that, the call ended. Felix turned to the others. Looks like everything's all right. That's a relief, he sighed. That's it. Felicia shouted. I want to see more of that Peter. Mama demands to see DILF Peter. She grabbed Felix by the collar, pulling him closer with intimidating eyes. Bring him back. Now. Jesus Christ, woman, what is your problem? Felix yelled, trying to pry her hands away. Did you not see how gorgeous that man was? You're telling me I married that? Talk to him more. He's your father, for crying out loud. Weren't you worried about the future? I got all I needed from that interaction. Felix replied, horrified. He's relaxed and not concerned, so the future isn't being affected by my presence here. Felicia sighed, slumping her shoulders. Arya, please tell me you captured it. Hey, who do you think I am? Of course, I captured it. Arya said, displaying an image of future Peter leaning back in his chair, holding his drink. Yes, Felicia secretly celebrated. Meanwhile, MJ was walking out of the Daily Bugle when her phone buzzed. She pulled it out and froze. No way. MJ muttered, staring at the screen in disbelief at Arya's message, guess who? Mama scored a jackpot. Peter and Gwen, just exiting an alleyway, dusted off their bags when Gwen felt her phone buzz. She looked at the message and did a double take. Her mouth dropped as she compared the picture on her screen to Peter standing next to her. He's so hot. Nightwing, perched on a water tower with Firestar floating nearby, felt his phone buzz. He looked at the message and couldn't help but curse. What the fuck? Nightwing blurted out. Firestar floated down, curious. Whoa, who's that? I think, that's Peter from the future. Eh? Seriously? Firestar asked in surprise. If he looks like that, I bet you look way hotter. Seriously? Nightwing smirked. Firestar shrugged. I always found you cuter than him. Never saw the appeal the others had for him. He kinda weirded me out, actually. Nightwing grinned. Aren't I the lucky one? Weirded you out? Nightwing asked, catching on to what she said. Don't tell him I said that. Felicia looked at her phone and smiled. And saved. Felix stared at his mother, disgusted. I will never see you the same way again. All I'm saying is I finally understand why he has a harem, Felicia said, lifting her hands in surrender. What now? Betty asked, raising an eyebrow. He's dating Gwen and MJ, and apparently me in the future too. Felix raised a finger to correct her but decided to stay silent. Bruce and Betty exchanged looks, both at a loss for words. Finally, Bruce shook his head. You guys do you, I guess. I'm not gonna judge. Say, did I, future me, ever mention how or why Parker and I got together? Felix wore a pensive expression before his eyes widened, and he smiled. So that's what she meant. They looked at him, confused, as Felix explained. You know how, when you're younger, you ask a lot of questions to your parents. Well, when I was little, around 5, I asked you, well, future you, about my father when you were putting me to bed. Flashback: a 5-year-old Felix was being tucked into bed by an older Felicia. Felicia moved her hair behind her ear and leaned down to kiss his forehead. Good night, my little kitten. As she stood up, Felix grabbed her hand with his little fingers. Yes. Felicia asked with a smile. Can you stay with me until I fall asleep? Felix pleaded with wide eyes. Of course, Felicia smiled, lying down beside him. Hey, Mommy, can I ask you a question? Always. What was Daddy like in the past? Felicia chuckled. Why don't you ask him yourself? Because he'll exaggerate and tell me things I didn't even ask about, Felix muttered. Felicia smiled as she brushed his hair from his forehead. Your father, if I had to describe him in one word. Unstoppable, she muttered in a mystifying manner. Whoa, really? Felicia nodded. No one could stop him. Some came close, but your father rose again and again. There were times when we thought we'd lost him for good, but he miraculously survived. That's why our spider logo is recognized as a symbol of heroes, why your father is known as the hero of heroes. Is that why you married him? Felix asked, curious. Oh no, Felicia chuckled. Though his personality was one of the reasons, there was something else. I caught a glimpse of his future potential, it was captivating. I don't get it. Felicia smiled and kissed his forehead. You will. One day, you'll remember this moment, and it'll all make sense. End flashback, his future potential, huh? You were talking about his looks. Who tells their 5-year-old son that? Felix grumbled, his eyebrows twitching. It sounds like your mother knew you'd be in the past. Betty remarked. Like she knew exactly what was going to happen, Bruce added, as they all turned to stare at Felicia. Felix nodded. So, my visit to the past was meant to happen. They already experienced it. That's why Dad wasn't surprised when I called him from the past, he just asked if I wanted to come back. Bruce turned to Felix. Your presence here is meant to be. It's a fixed point in time, which is why the future isn't being affected, this was always supposed to happen. I still think you should be cautious about what you say, though, Betty warned. Your words can still affect the future, even if you're meant to be here. Felix nodded in agreement, understanding Betty's concern. Peter and Gwen were walking to their internship when Gwen showed him a picture that Arya had sent her. And who's this handsome fellow? Peter asked, raising an eyebrow. So I was right, he suddenly shouted, startling Gwen. About what? Gwen asked, confused. I was so close when I built that time machine using the microwave and blender. All I needed was more rotation speed, it just wasn't fast enough. That's what's bothering you, not the fact that your future self is on my screen. I knew I was going to be godly handsome when I got older, so that's no surprise. But that microwave and blender, it's seriously bugging me more than it should. Peter turned to Gwen with a frustrated expression and pinched his fingers together. I was this close to cracking time travel at age 7. This close. As they entered the Baxter building, Gwen laughed, amused at how much home appliances were bothering Peter. In the elevator, Gwen kissed Peter's cheek. You're such a dork sometimes, but I love those moments, she giggled. Peter pouted. I could have cracked time travel. Maybe next time. Gwen teased, patting his back as the elevator doors opened to their internship. Chapter 180, and there it is. Third person's POV. Before Peter and Gwen entered and stood in front of the door, Gwen leaned over and asked, What do you think Felix meant when he said the Fantastic Four? Who do you think? Peter asked, raising a brow. I understand that, but why would he call them that? Maybe because they become fantastic or something. Gwen, honey, I know as much as you do. Speaking of Felix. Peter took out his phone and sent him a message through Aria, before showing Gwen and putting his phone back in his pocket. Really? Gwen asked, raising an eyebrow. Are you sure that's going to be okay? This is mostly a test to see how he does. I'm curious about how he handles things, Peter explained. You know this could go very wrong for you, right? Gwen asked with an unsure expression. I'll be able to fix it if it does. I hope. For someone who can see into the future, you sure don't think ahead, do you? Gwen said in a low voice, shaking her head. Just then, the door opened, revealing Johnny, looking at them in confusion. I thought I heard voices. What are you guys doing? Come in. Sorry, we were making out in front of your doorstep. Peter. Gwen said, slapping the side of his arm. Johnny just laughed. Sure. I knew I had a thing for older men. Mom, gross. Felix said, seeing Felicia stare at the picture Aria sent them. I'm so thankful Uncle Bruce and Aunt Betty left so they didn't have to hear you say something so embarrassing. You have a message from Father, little bro, Aria said, appearing on the big screen. Little bro? Felix asked in amusement, before shaking his head. What is it? He says, and I quote, it's time to fill Dad's shoes while he's absent. Since I've been busy with my internship, I haven't been very active in my role as Spider-Man during the day, so I'm giving that responsibility to my son. There's a backup watch in my lab. Have fun. Rock and roll fingers emoji, web emojis, end quote. Is he crazy? I'm not doing that. I know he's not stupid, doesn't he realize my actions still affect the timeline? Even saving one person could cause irreversible damage and alter time. Felicia stopped looking at the picture and gave Felix a weird look. Are you saying you wouldn't go out and save someone because you're scared of the consequences? Yes. Felix said, as if the answer were the most obvious in the world. I guess this is where the similarities between you and your father end. Felicia mumbled as she zoomed in on the picture, focusing on Peter's hazel eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Felix asked, raising an eyebrow. I've known Peter for about 2 or 3 months now, and had my powers for less. One of the things I've realized about Peter in such a short time is that he has no fear. He has worries, insecurities, and uncertainties, but never fear. Especially when it comes to being a hero. If it means saving the person in front of him, Peter doesn't care about the consequences. Felicia said, searching for any signs of graying hair. Bummer. She muttered. Yeah, well, it's not your family that's on the line, is it? You're talking about putting my mother, my father, my sisters, my brothers, my entire timeline, in danger just to be a hero to some stranger. And the gap keeps on widening. Felicia said, zooming in and out of Peter's pecs. Felix got ticked off upon hearing that. I'm not my father, all right. And I'll never be. No one will ever be. I see all my brothers and sisters trying to live up to my father, and they've almost gotten killed more times than I can count. It pisses me off how everyone expects me to be like him, how they expect us all to be better. How can anyone be better than the greatest men you've ever known? News flash, you can't. And there it is. Felicia said, sitting down, still staring at Peter's hazel eyes. There what is? You said you were meant to be here, but why? Maybe you're here for this reason, for what you're currently feeling. From what I've heard and seen, you worship Peter like he's some kind of god, like the second coming of Jesus or something. And trust me when I say, Parker is the furthest thing from a god. He's the most human person I know. Felicia scoffed. Wanna know what I think? Felicia asked, looking at the picture one more time before reluctantly putting it down. I think it wasn't a coincidence that you appeared when you did. You appeared just when Peter was starting out as a hero, you might as well call this time, Spider-Man, freshman year. Superhero rule number 13. What? If Peter taught you like he was supposed to, he would have taught you the sacred rules of being a superhero. What's rule number 13? Felicia asked again. Felix grumbled, looking down. In the world of superheroes, when things seem like a coincidence, they're most likely not a coincidence. Exactly. So do you really think it's a coincidence that you appeared at this specific point in time? Like you said, the time stream randomly threw you out, but was it really that random? So, you acting like Spider-Man isn't going to affect the timeline, it's most likely something you were meant to do, to learn the true essence of what it's like being Spider-Man. Felix's shoulders slumped as he looked up and let out a groan. Why is now the moment you decide to show that you're actually really smart? Felicia smiled warmly, winking and sticking her tongue out while flashing a peace sign. Because my son clearly needs help. Felix sighed, walking away in exaggerated, almost drunken motions, swinging his arms side to side and kicking the air in front of him. And where are you going? Felicia asked with amusement. To get that stupid backup watch of his. Felix grumbled, kicking the air once more. Felicia smiled wider, tilting her head with a loving expression. Even the way he pouts is just like him, she thought fondly. A moment later, Felix returned with the watch, which he slapped over his wrist. Felicia leaped into the air, spinning gracefully as she transformed into her Spider-Cat outfit, landing next to Felix with one hand on her hip. Felix glanced at her and tapped on his watch, causing the Spider-Man suit to shift over his body. You're being extra for no reason. Spider-Cat pouted playfully. I thought it was cool. Plus, it's time for some mother-son hero action. Let's just go, Felix sighed, glancing down at his suit, adjusting to the feel of it. Are you nervous? Spider-Cat asked, her voice curious. A little. I mean, I'm supposed to go out there and pretend to be the amazing Spider-Man, New York's greatest hero. It's not exactly something you can mentally prepare for. You're Peter's kid. Trust me, you'll do just fine, Spider-Cat said, giving his back a reassuring pat. See, that's the problem, Felix muttered. Everyone expects me to be great because of who my dad is. It's starting to get annoying. Spider-Cat wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Well, there's another reason you'll do great. You're not just Peter's son, you're mine too. And knowing how amazing I am, you're bound to be just as amazing. Felix scoffed, but under his mask, a small smile crept across his face. Her confidence in him just for being her son struck a chord. Taking a deep breath, Felix nodded. All right, let's do this. They both rushed out of the hideout, launching into the air as their webs shot out, propelling them across the skyline of New York City. As they swung through the air, Arya appeared in Felix's HUD. Let me guide you to where you need to go, little bro. Suddenly, a white tiger cub appeared, shoving Arya aside. That's not going to happen. Felix is my master, so I'll be guiding him. Winston declared possessively. Arya reappeared, pushing Winston back. Don't shove me, you smelly furball. How can I smell when I'm an AI, you silly spiderling? Winston shot back. The two continued bickering on Felix's display. I can smell your bad ones and zeros from here, you uncivilized wet cat. Arya snapped. Enough, you two. Felix interrupted with a firm tone. Get along, and remember what's important. Reluctantly, Arya and Winston stopped their argument, sitting down with their arms crossed and pouting. Who's the cute little guy? Spider-Cat asked, noticing Winston on Felix's display, clearly amused. That's Winston, my AI, Felix replied. I thought Arya was the AI for all of you kids. Well, I can't say too much, it might mess with the future. But what I can say is that before we could start being superheroes, Dad had a rule, each of us had to create our own AI to prove we were ready. So I made Winston. I see, so it's like how Peter is with Arya. Not really, Dad is just really weird. We treat our AI companions more like best friends, Felix said, glancing at Winston, who flashed a toothy grin and gave a thumbs up with his paw. Spider-Cat rolled her eyes, doing a quick barrel roll in the air. That's not much different from how Peter treats Arya, she thought. Felix looked between Winston and Arya. Please, you two. Instead of fighting, work together. We need to save as many people as we can. We're sorry, they muttered apologetically. After a moment of hesitation, they sighed and extended their hands, shaking on it with a nod of agreement. They began working together, scanning the massive city of New York to find those in need of their help. Chapter 181, Spider-Mom, Third Person's POV, how's the containment shield looking? Reed asked, looking at the other side of the growing portal machine, where Peter was seen working on something. Peter glanced up from his work, wiping some grease off his hands. The containment shield is stable for now, but we still need to account for the exotic particle fluctuations we saw in the last test. If we don't adjust the quantum field dampeners, we could face another energy surge. We can't let that kind of radiation leak again. Reed nodded thoughtfully. Agreed. I've been working on a way to increase the frequency of the dampeners without causing additional strain on the core generator. If we adjust the feedback loop with a triphasic modulation pattern, it should create a more consistent field stability. That could work. We'll need to reprogram the magnetic constrictors to handle the new modulation, though. I was thinking of making a titanium-based alloy to reinforce them. I should be able to make it so its unique properties should help absorb the extra energy without destabilizing. Reed rubbed his chin. If you seriously think you're able to do it, go ahead, but we'll also need to ensure that its energy absorption doesn't interfere with the harmonic resonance of the portal. Otherwise, it could destabilize the dimensional rift. What's your read on the resonance parameters? Peter looked over at the console displaying the data. It's holding at 33.7 terahertz right now, but we're pushing the limits. Any higher and we'll risk dimensional overlap. That's why I was thinking of introducing a feedback dampener into the portal matrix. It would help redistribute excess energy and prevent resonance spikes. Reed smiled, impressed. A feedback dampener in the matrix? You're really thinking ahead. But we'll need to program it to react faster than normal systems, something capable of adjusting in picoseconds. I've got a prototype nanocircuit system that could do just that. Peter quickly grabbed his tablet to pull up some schematics. If we integrate your nanocircuits with the neural network we built for the core, it should be able to predict and adjust the portal's behavior before a spike even happens. Sort of like an early warning system. But we'll have to test it under high-stress conditions. Reed tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the console. Testing it under stress conditions is a must. But we'll also need to monitor for dimensional drift. Any miscalculation in the portal's targeting system, and we might open a rift to the wrong universe. Have you thought about recalibrating the temporal signature analyzer to improve accuracy? Peter nodded. I was just about to suggest that. If we fine-tune it to detect quantum fluctuations at the Planck scale, we can ensure the portal locks onto the exact coordinates we need. It'll give us a margin of error close to zero. Perfect, Reed replied. But let's not forget about the graviton displacement issue. We're still seeing minor fluctuations around the portal's event horizon. If we don't get that under control, any object passing through could be torn apart. Right, Peter agreed, tapping his foot. I think we could stabilize it by creating a gravitational counterbalance. Maybe we use negative energy fields around the event horizon. Something similar to the Casimir effect. It could counteract the displacement. Reed's face lit up. Brilliant, Parker. Negative energy fields might be just what we need. But generating a stable field on that scale, it's going to take a lot of power, more than we've been using so far. We'll need to reinforce the power grid with something beyond traditional energy sources. Peter thought for a moment. What if we tapped into a zero-point energy field? It's theoretically infinite, and if we manage the extraction rate carefully, it could supply the necessary power without destabilizing the portal. Zero-point energy. Reed said, grinning. I like the way you think. It's risky, but with the right containment protocols, we might just pull it off. Let's get to work on integrating these systems and run some simulations before we proceed. Peter nodded and sighed. This is going to be one crazy month. Before Peter got back to work, he took out his phone and quickly texted Aunt May, Peter, can I bring some people over for dinner? Peter, I'll buy groceries on the way back. Aunt May, why? What's the occasion? Peter, it's a surprise. You'll definitely love it. Aunt May, knowing you, I seriously doubt it. How many are coming? Peter, I'm not sure yet. I haven't asked the others. Peter, plus, I'll help you cook. What could be better than some aunt-nephew bonding time? Aunt May, I can think of a lot of things, actually. Peter, why are you always dissing me? Do we have a problem or something? Aunt May, I don't know, do we? Aunt May, anyway, I'm busy. Bye, love you, see you soon. Peter, love you too, Peter. Reed asked, raising an eyebrow. Is something the matter? Sorry about that, boss. I was texting my aunt. It won't happen again. Please don't fire me. I really need this job. Peter began pleading pitifully. Reed scoffed and chuckled, amused. As if I could fire you. I'd be shooting myself in the foot, and doubling the time it would take to finish this. Does that mean I can be Employee of the Month? Peter asked hopefully as he put his phone away. I don't think we even have such a thing. Reed replied, tilting his head in confusion. Ooh, can we start that? I'd be the first employee to win it. Peter said excitedly. Reed just laughed. You get excited over the strangest things. Hey, can I ask you a question? Spider-Cat asked as she used a building as a springboard to leap higher. You've all asked me so many questions already. Do you even need to ask? Felix sighed as he swung casually, using his many years of practice. How long have you been a superhero? I can't imagine you being one for long and not knowing what that entails. But what confuses me is you've got a villain like the Time Lord, who seems like a seriously powerful bad guy that can manipulate time. I've been doing this for close to a year. In my time, well, in the future, a lot of villains started appearing. They all had different powers and thought they were invincible just because of it. So, my siblings and I created a system. Whoever encounters a first-time villain adds them to their rogues gallery. I had the misfortune of facing the Time Lord in my first 6 months. He's a wizard who developed a spell to siphon time from people and use it to rejuvenate himself and power his spells. Wait. Magic's real? Spider-Cat asked, looking at Felix in shock. Felix swung over to a building, placing a hand on his hip. We have superpowers that defy reality, and you're amazed that magic is real? This can be explained by science. Magic can't. Ugh, that sounds like something Peter would say, Spider-Cat grumbled. But that's beside the point. Tell me, how have you spent your time as a hero? Spider-Cat asked, tilting her head. Felix shrugged. What every hero does, fighting villains that threaten people's safety. Is that all? Spider-Cat asked, frowning. Let me ask you this. I refuse to believe your father didn't teach you well, but did you at least pay attention to any lessons or advice he gave you? Felix rubbed the back of his head, embarrassed. I might have fallen asleep during some of his lessons. Spider-Cat looked at him in confusion. Are you narcoleptic? No, but my powers do make me sleepier. I just like to indulge in those urges, Felix admitted. Spider-Cat sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. Things are starting to make sense. Follow me. She landed on one of the lower buildings, and Felix followed. What's wrong? Felix asked. What's wrong is you spend too much time up here and not enough down there. Spider-Cat motioned toward the street below. It's time for you to do some community service. What? Why am I being punished? I didn't do anything wrong, Felix asked, taken aback. And that's your problem. Do you think Peter would view helping people or doing something nice for his community as a punishment? Well, no, but what does that have to do with being a superhero? Isn't that just my father and siblings being super friendly? Spider-Cat looked up at the sky and sighed. Now we know why it's you here and not them. Why do I have to be the one with the socially inept son? And why am I the one teaching him this? Shouldn't his father be doing this? She turned toward Felix, her expression turning serious. Being a superhero is more than just beating up villains. I know, it's about making sure people are safe and protected from harm. But to do that, I need to take down the villains threatening their lives. Felix said, matching her tone as he understood. Spider-Cat nodded. I won't deny that's a major part of it. But there's so much more. It's about connecting with people, being there for someone in need, even when they're not in mortal danger or being threatened by a supervillain. It's about helping someone, no matter how small the problem is. She tapped the spider symbol on Felix's suit. The super in superheroes is just a description of your powers. What really matters is the hero part. Being a hero means stepping up to help someone when no one else will. When people see someone struggling with something small or in their eyes insignificant, all they can think is, someone else will help, why bother, or, that's not my problem, they'll figure it out. But that's the difference between a common person and a hero, being able to act when everyone else ignores it. And that's something you need to learn if you really want to call yourself a hero. Why do you think people love your father so much? Is it because he's the strongest there is? No, it's because they see how much he cares. He spends time with his neighborhood and connects with the people there. They see a guy who genuinely cares, and they can't help but love him for it. Felix stood quietly as he noticed someone pointing toward them. With his enhanced senses, he picked up their excited shouts. It's Spider-Man. Hey, Spider-Man. Going to catch another bad guy, Spider-Man. Have a good swing, Spider-Man. Felix couldn't help but smile and give a small wave back. Meanwhile, Spider-Cat stood to the side, thinking to herself, I don't think he's just here to become a better hero. Maybe he's here for me, too. So I can learn alongside him. Chapter 182, Shopping, Third Person's POV. Felix and Spider-Cat were swinging through the city when Spider-Cat spotted an old man slowly crossing the street. Yo. Spider-Cat motioned. On it. Felix replied as he swung down in a blur of lightning, picking up the old man just in the nick of time as a car sped towards him. Felix landed gently and set the man down. Are you okay, sir? Apart from the heart attack I nearly had. I'd say I'm fine, the old man chuckled, patting Felix's chest. Thank you, Sonny, you saved this old man's life. Ah, don't worry. Just make sure to look both ways, Felix nodded before swinging ahead. So, how did that feel? Spider-Cat asked teasingly. I mean, I usually get thanked for stopping villains, but for something small like this. It's a first. Feels nice, Felix muttered. To you, it might seem small, but to someone else, you just saved a precious life, someone's grandfather, someone's father. Never think helping someone is a small thing. Which kinda contradicts what I said earlier, but life's full of contradictions. Spider-Cat said, twirling in the air mid-swing. This is seriously turning into more of a lesson for me, Spider-Cat sighed inwardly. Felix and Spider-Cat continued swinging through the streets of New York, scanning for anyone else in need. The city bustled as usual, but today they were focused on the little things. As they soared above a park, Spider-Cat spotted a boy frantically searching the ground, his face scrunched in worry. Felix, hold up, she called, veering down toward the boy. Felix followed and landed lightly beside him. Hey, what's up, little man? You lose something, he asked gently. The boy sniffled, holding up a stuffed bunny missing an ear. I dropped his ear somewhere, and I can't find it. He's my favorite, and now he's ruined. Spider-Cat crouched down to meet his eyes. We can help. Spider-Man. On it, Felix grinned, zipping around the area. He quickly found the fluffy ear in a bush and handed it to the boy. Here you go. Looks like your bunny's back to normal, Felix said with a smile. The boy's eyes lit up as he clutched the ear. Thank you. I thought I'd never find it. He ran off to his mother, who gave Felix and Spider-Cat a grateful nod. Felix watched them go, a soft expression on his face. You know, this feels just as good as stopping a bad guy. It's like, we're doing something that matters, even if it's small. Spider-Cat leaned against a lamppost with a smirk. Told you. Sometimes it's not about the flashy hero stuff. It's about showing up for people when they need it, even if it's just for a stuffed bunny. Felix chuckled. All right. I'm starting to get it now. Let's see who else we can help. They continued swinging, helping people cross the street, finding lost items, and even helping an elderly lady carry her groceries up some stairs. Every person they helped gave them a smile, a thank you, or a look of relief. Later, sitting on top of a building, watching the sunset, Spider-Cat stretched. Not bad for a day's work, huh? Felix nodded, feeling an unexpected sense of fulfillment. Yeah. I guess being a hero isn't always about saving the world. Sometimes, it's about making someone's day a little better. Spider-Cat smiled at the cityscape. Exactly. Then she turned to Felix with an awkward expression. Please tell me I'm not the only one cringing right now. Felix hugged himself, rubbing his arms. I know what you mean. That mushy stuff was kind of disgusting. I can't believe we said all that. Spider-Cat laughed, patting his back. Let's keep our conversations, though meaningful, a little less cringeworthy. Felix chuckled. Agreed, completely. Later in the day. Later, guys. Peter saluted as they left. The rest of the future Fantastic Four waved them off. Be sure to come early tomorrow. I should have my ride fully pimped out. I give the best rides of your life. Johnny said with a smirk. Peter froze and stared at Johnny, who also froze as he realized the way Peter was looking at him. Two things, Johnny. Please don't. Peter ignored his plea. First. I didn't know you were a pimp. That's some secret double life you've got there, please stop right there. I really appreciate that joke, don't ruin it. And second, watch what you say. Gwen might get seriously jealous and see that as a challenge or competition. Peter sighed and shook his head. Johnny sighed in return, though a smirk lingered. And you just had to go and ruin it. Gwen gave Peter a deadpan look. Why am I always being dragged into whatever gay relationship you have? Wah. Johnny overheard them as the door closed behind Peter and Gwen. Shaking his head, he went back to working on his ride. In the elevator, Peter turned to Gwen. What was that supposed to mean? First, there's Harry. It's not gay if it's with the bro. Then there's Flash. It was obvious everyone thought he had a thing for me, not the other way around. And now Johnny. Johnny's a homie. It's also not gay if it's with the homies. Gwen gave him a teasing look. You know, sometimes I wonder if you're bi. Peter turned, confused. He was about to ask what she meant but noticed her teasing expression. You seriously had me worried there. I thought I'd have to show you what my orientation really is right here and now, so you're saying you'd have explained it to me in this elevator? Gwen asked, raising an eyebrow. Absolutely. Gwen scoffed as the elevator descended to the lobby. Oh, by the way, we're stopping for groceries at the supermarket. All right, but why'd you give your bike to Felix? We could have used it. Gwen sighed, thinking about how annoying it would be to swing home with grocery bags. Don't worry, I messaged Arya earlier. She brought the bike to us, Peter said proudly as they made their way to the parking lot. Thank God for advanced technology, Gwen sighed with relief. As they approached the bike, Peter grinned. God had nothing to do with it. That was all me. Gwen rolled her eyes as she grabbed her helmet and got on the bike, holding on to Peter. It's a figure of speech. Once at the supermarket, Peter rested his feet on the low bar of the cart while Gwen pulled him inside. Peter cheered like a kid, causing Gwen to chuckle in amusement. They gathered their groceries, and as Gwen inspected expiration dates in the dairy section, Peter couldn't resist pushing the cart into her. Gwen closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and chose to ignore him. Hee. Peter did it again. Peter, I swear to God. Gwen said through gritted teeth. Peter tried to push the cart one more time, but Gwen grabbed it and started ramming it back and forth into him. How do you like it, huh? Shoppers around them gave the couple some odd looks, but Gwen didn't care as she was simply too pissed off at Peter. They eventually finished and made their way to the checkout line. As Gwen dragged Peter through the shortest line, she muttered, I'm dating a literal child. Well, I am 15. Irrelevant. Of course it would be for you. You're 21 after all. Age is just a number. The person ahead of them turned with concern, staring at them. Peter leaned on the cart, laughing hysterically, while Gwen facepalmed in embarrassment. I'm sorry about my boyfriend, she said. The person still looked disturbed, so Gwen pulled out her student ID, which only made Peter laugh harder. We're the same age, Gwen said, her voice strained. But someone doesn't act like it sometimes. The stranger sighed in relief but gave them an awkward smile before turning back. Gwen glared at Peter, mouthing, I'm going to kill you. Peter, still laughing, threw up a peace sign, sticking his tongue out playfully. After paying for their groceries and heading outside, Gwen shot Peter a look. Embarrass me like that again and see what happens. Peter grinned mischievously. You know, it's kinda hot when you threaten me like that. Gwen rolled her eyes as they continued walking. Is that why you do these things? Do you like me threatening you? Before Peter could respond, they heard someone yell, "Help! Someone stole my bike." Without missing a beat, Peter stuck out his arm, clotheslining the thief off the bike, due to the force of which he was riding and how strong Peter's armor he was knocked unconscious. Gwen swiftly set the bike upright with a flick of her foot and handed it back. Peter glanced at Gwen with a smirk. It's not the threats. It's the look on your face. I like seeing it sometimes. Gwen gave him a flat stare. You're unbelievable. They rearranged their groceries on the bike and rode off. Chapter 183, Resemblance, Third Person's POV, Yo. Yo. Peter called out as he entered the house, arms full of shopping bags, with Gwen following behind, also loaded down. They headed straight for the kitchen and set the bags on the counter, just as Aunt May appeared. Looks like you two went on quite the shopping spree, Aunt May said with a smile, helping them unpack and put everything away. So, Peter, Aunt May continued after stashing away the last of the empty bags, what's this big news you're itching to share? Peter grinned proudly, webbing a nearby knife into his hand. You'll find out when the time's right. I wouldn't be going through all this trouble otherwise. Aunt May raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. First of all, don't use your webbing on things you plan to cook with. And second, are you saying you only spend time with us when you've got something to announce? Peter rolled his eyes but smiled, flipping the knife in his hand before starting to chop vegetables. You'll see, he said, dodging her pointed question. Can't you give me just a little hint? Aunt May teased, trying again. For once, Gwen came to Peter's defense. I'm usually on your side, Aunt May, but I've got to back Peter up on this one. It's better if you wait. Peter glanced at Gwen with mock offense. Wait a second, what do you mean, usually on her side? I'm your boyfriend. You're supposed to always be on my side. Ignoring him, Gwen and Aunt May shared a playful exchange. Really? Well, if you're saying that, Gwen dear, I'll trust you. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked am I going to be? Gwen considered for a moment before nodding. A solid 9. Aunt May's eyes widened. A 9. Oh Lord, now I'm getting anxious. She suddenly turned toward Gwen with wide eyes. Wait, you're not pregnant, are you? Gwen's face dropped, and she quickly looked down at her stomach. No. Why? Do I look pregnant? Aunt May hurriedly waved her hands. No. It's just that you seem just as eager about this news as Peter, so I just assumed. Gwen chuckled, shaking her head. It's not that. But I promise you'll have a reaction when you hear it. The conversation continued as they cooked together, diving into various topics, laughter filling the room. Near the end of their preparations, Uncle Ben arrived home. He greeted everyone warmly before taking a quick shower and joining Peter to help set the table. As they worked, there was a knock on the door. Uncle Ben opened it to find MJ standing there with a cake. Peter didn't say if we were supposed to bring anything, so. I brought dessert just in case, she said sheepishly, holding the cake out. Uncle Ben laughed, stepping aside to let her in. Haha, come on in. Peter and I were just finishing setting up. Soon, more guests started to trickle in. Harry and Lizzie arrived next. This feels weird, Lizzie admitted shyly. I've never been to a family dinner that wasn't my own before, it feels kinda personal. Aunt May glanced around the room. So, shall we get started? Wait, the star of the night isn't here yet, Peter started to say, just as another knock came from the front door. Oh, that must be them. Peter said excitedly, practically skipping to the door. Uncle Ben and Aunt May exchanged confused glances, while the others grinned knowingly, eager to see their reactions. Peter returned with 2 people beside him, Felix walking between Peter and Felicia. Sorry for the intrusion, Felicia said, stepping inside. Aunt May blinked, looking at the newcomers. And, who are they? Felicia raised her hand slightly. Felicia Hardy. Uncle Ben squinted, then nodded in recognition. Oh, right. You're that girl from the hospital, aren't you? Felicia rubbed the back of her head, slightly embarrassed. Yeah, that's me. Aunt May and Uncle Ben then turned their eyes toward Felix, who casually gave them a two-finger salute. Yo. They both stared at Felix, tilting their heads in confusion. His mannerisms felt oddly familiar. Before they could say anything, Peter, chest puffed out with pride, patted Felix on the shoulder. This is Felix Parker. My son, from the future. Huh. Eh. Peter grinned even wider, giving Felicia a look. She sighed, and both she and Peter squished Felix's face between their own faces with a beaming smile. Can't you see the resemblance? Peter asked proudly. Felix, looking awkwardly squished between his parents' faces, waved half-heartedly. Hey, Grandpa Ben. Grandma May. Aunt May and Uncle Ben remained rooted in place, switching their gazes between Peter and Felix. Slowly, their eyes widened as they began to see the undeniable resemblance. What? Aunt May screeched. Uncle Ben, looking shell-shocked, glanced at Harry, Gwen, and MJ. Are they joking? The three friends shook their heads with smiles on their faces. They're telling the truth, Harry said. The future? Uncle Ben asked in shock. Yes, confirmed. He's from the future? Yup, they all confirmed once more. Zero, the future. They all nodded their heads once again, smiling. Uncle Ben ran a hand through his hair, glancing up at the ceiling with a deep sigh. This family is never going to be normal again, is it? Aunt May clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Peter. Peter, is that really my grandbaby from the future? And I want you to answer carefully, because if you're lying, we're going to have a serious problem. Felix awkwardly raised a hand. I've got pictures to prove it, he offered with a small grin. Aunt May's eyes snapped open, and Peter swore he saw flames flickering in them. Show me. She demanded, narrowing her eyes. Felix reached into his back pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a few swipes. He swiped up, and a holographic screen appeared, showing an image of a younger version of himself being carried by Aunt May. He swiped again, revealing another image of him sitting on her lap. Aunt May slapped a hand over her mouth in shock, then placed it on her forehead. Good Lord. She muttered, exasperation mixing with a growing smile on her face. But then, she froze. Slowly, she turned her head to Felix, then to Felicia, then Gwen, then MJ. Back to Felix. Then Peter. Her gaze bounced between Gwen and MJ again before finally locking onto Felicia. After a slow, deliberate turn back to Peter, she asked, Peter. Yup. Why is she his mother? I don't know, ask future me. Me and her aren't together. Aunt May narrowed her eyes at Felix. You. Felix, right. There's no better way to ask this but. Are you Peter's illegitimate child or something? Felix blinked, completely thrown off. Huh? What? Are you asking if I'm his bastard? No, I'm not. He and my mother are together. As they always say, the future is full of endless possibilities. Peter chimed in quickly, beads of sweat forming on his brow. But you know what's not full? My stomach. So let's fix that problem and eat some of this delicious food before it gets cold. Peter marched ahead, hoping to escape the awkward tension. I agree. Everyone should sit down before the food gets cold, but we're not done here, young man, Aunt May added, motioning for everyone to take their seats. Everyone complied, diving into the meal, but Aunt May's piercing stare stayed locked on Peter the entire time. He chose to pretend she wasn't glaring at him, as technically, none of this was his fault. So, why are you here, in the past, I mean? Uncle Ben asked curiously, wanting to understand more about this unexpected grandnephew. I was fighting a time-based villain, Felix explained casually. I'm stuck here until he shows up again so I can bring him back to my time. Both Aunt May and Uncle Ben sighed at how nonchalant Felix was about fighting villains. Two things, Uncle Ben began. First, you seem pretty comfortable talking about this. I take it everyone here knows. He glanced around at the others. They all nodded, confirming his suspicion. And second, does this become a family business? Uncle Ben asked, glancing at Peter with raised eyebrows. Aunt May grumbled at the question. Now she not only had to worry about her nephew risking his life every day, but also her potential future grandkids. Kinda. Dad gives us the choice, Felix said. None of us are forced into it. We all chose to be heroes, though some act more like villains, he muttered, recalling one of his older brothers. I suppose that's good, Uncle Ben said, nodding thoughtfully. As long as it's a choice you've made for yourself, and you're happy with the direction you're going, that's what matters. Felix smirked, appreciating Uncle Ben's words. It was comforting to see that the advice-giving grandpa he knew in the future was just the same in the past. Chapter 184, Feast and Shelter, Third Person's POV. So how many children does Peter have in the future? Aunt May asked, looking towards Felix curiously. I can't really say since it could change the future. I might end up erasing myself or one of my siblings because of what I say, Felix replied as he stuffed his mouth with food. I see, but can I at least know if he has a lot? Oh yeah. Felix nodded in exasperation. Peter and Uncle Ben, sitting next to each other, exchanged a look and shared a small fist bump under the table. You player, Uncle Ben teased. Peter just rubbed his chin and smirked, while Felicia, sitting close to Aunt May, leaned over and showed her phone. Here, look at this. Is that really how he's going to look? Aunt May asked in amusement as she looked at a picture of older Peter. You have to send me that picture. Don't worry, I got you, Felicia smirked, showing the picture to Ben, who began to laugh heartily. He rubbed his beard and patted Peter's back. Looks like the good beard genetics are strong in the men of our family. Even though they were talking about his future self, Peter couldn't help but feel a tad embarrassed. I'm mostly worried about what I'd look like with a beard. Harry said with an awkward smile, imagining it. Don't worry, you grow a goatee, Felix started. Ew, both Aunt May and Lizzie said at the same time. Lizzie immediately covered her mouth and looked toward Harry apologetically. Wow, Harry said, looking a little betrayed as he glanced at Aunt May and Lizzie. Both Lizzie and Aunt May looked at each other before chuckling. Harry, I love you like you're one of my own, but I just can't imagine you with a goatee, Aunt May said, giving him an apologetic look as well. Oh, by the way, I was just joking about the goatee. I wanted to see if it would change the future a bit if I said that you had one, Felix added apologetically. Oh, thank God, both Harry and Lizzie said at the same time. Harry turned toward her. What's with you today? Sorry, Lizzie said in a cutesy voice, hugging his arm and leaning on his shoulder. Aunt May then pointed her fork toward MJ and Gwen. Listen, girls, I know you both love Peter dearly and let him get away with a lot of things, but you have to lock it down. It's already gotten out of hand. Both MJ and Gwen wore awkward expressions as Peter looked at Aunt May in exasperation. Come on, Aunt May. Am I not your nephew? How am I supposed to grow my harem to the size of Solomon's if you're going to block me? Felix put a hand over his face and looked away. Is he stupid? Why would he joke about that? Both MJ and Gwen gave Peter a look. MJ's was the most effective, her expression blank, which wasn't an expression you wanted to see on a girl that wears her emotions on her sleeve. Peter shrank back. Sorry. He muttered, focusing on his plate. Aunt May shook her head, placing the back of her hand on her forehead. Where did I go wrong raising you? Felix, baby, whatever you do, don't turn out like your father. I'll try my best not to, Felix nodded seriously. What's that supposed to mean? I'm a great example to follow. I'm the world's best role model. Everyone around the table looked at Peter with uncertainty and began murmuring. I'm not so sure. Not really, sorry. I wouldn't say you're the best. There are definitely better out there. Not even close. Peter gave them all a straight look. I hate every single one of you. Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter, continuing to eat and banter until they were done. Peter and the others were about to insist on helping with the dishes, but Gwen and MJ took over, insisting as they began washing up while the others cleaned up after themselves. Peter looked at them in confusion as they whispered to each other. Are you really sure you want to do that? Gwen whispered. I'm really curious what it's like. Aren't you the least bit curious? MJ whispered back shyly, her ears turning red. No, not really. I haven't thought about that. It honestly never crossed my mind. I was going to keep it separate. But you heard Aunt May. It's me and you who have to keep it locked. You're weird. I've been around Peter for most of my life. I'd be surprised if I wasn't. Heh, I suppose you have a point. Meanwhile, Peter turned to Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Actually, there's something else I wanted to discuss with the two of you, apart from the matter with Felix. Oh God, what now? Aunt May asked, rolling her eyes. Ugh, this one isn't supernatural. It's regular news, about the two of you. You both know how I want to retire you, but you just won't let me, right? Peter, you literally made me younger. What am I supposed to do in retirement? Uncle Ben asked, shaking his head. Yeah, well, that's the thing. I found a way to do both, to make you guys retire and still do something meaningful. I want to open a shelter, and I want you two to run it, Peter said with a serious expression, catching them both off guard. A shelter? Aunt May asked, her curiosity piqued by the idea. Why a shelter? What made you think of this? Uncle Ben added, leaning in. It came to me during a fight with a supervillain. Our powers are incredible, but they also cause so much destruction. Buildings get wrecked, and people are left homeless until repairs are made. I wanted to create a place where they could take refuge, a shelter where they can get help. With the money and influence I have, I realized I can help people not just as Spider-Man, but also as Peter Parker, Peter explained, his tone earnest. Felix's eyes widened as he listened. So this is when it all started. I didn't think I'd get to witness this moment. It's amazing, he thought to himself. Oh, Peter, that's a wonderful idea, Aunt May said, placing a hand on her chest, clearly touched. Uncle Ben nodded, thinking it over. So, you want us to run this shelter as our retirement? We'd be retired, but still helping people, staying active. And I bet you'll be our boss, paying us that money you've always wanted to give but we wouldn't accept. Peter clicked his tongue, smiling. Am I really that predictable? A bit, yes, Uncle Ben chuckled. And have you thought of a name for this shelter? Aunt May asked, curious to see how much thought Peter had put into it. Yup, I've got a name all set. I'm calling it FEAST, Peter replied, smirking with pride. And knowing you, that's an acronym, Uncle Ben said with a raised eyebrow. You're damn right it is. Felix, why don't you tell them what it stands for? Peter said, turning to his son with a grin. Felix pointed at himself, surprised. You want me to say it? Yeah, if you know it, that means it became successful, Peter said proudly. Felix sighed before answering. Food, emergency, aid, shelter, training. FEAST. That's actually a great name, Aunt May nodded in approval. So, what do you guys say? Peter asked, looking at them with hope. We'll need to sit down and discuss the details, but overall, we're in, Uncle Ben agreed. Aunt May wrapped Peter in a deep, proud hug. You have no idea how proud I am of you. You see, you don't have to risk your life to be a hero and help people. She kissed his forehead, and Peter blushed as Felix snapped a photo of the moment, smirking at his dad's embarrassment. All right, Peter said, pulling away, still red-faced. I need to make sure everyone gets home safe. They all thanked Aunt May and Uncle Ben as they prepared to leave. You're all welcome here anytime, Aunt May said, waving with a smile. Actually, Felix and I have a little hero adventure planned, Felicia said, slinging her arm around Felix's shoulder, causing him to blush. Lizzie interlocked her fingers with Harry's. As for us, Harry's driving me home, so don't worry. With that, they all went their separate ways, leaving Peter with MJ and Gwen. And then there were the three musketeers, Peter joked, though his smile faltered when he remembered MJ lived right across the street. MJ giggled. Don't worry, I want to walk a little longer. We'll drop Gwen off first, she said, shaking her head with a sigh. If that's what you want, Peter shrugged, walking alongside them. A comfortable silence fell over them as they strolled under the night sky. Gwen and MJ wrapped their arms around Peter's, leaning their heads against his shoulders as they walked Gwen home in peaceful silence. Chapter 187, Our Purpose, Third Person's POV. Peter sat awake for the rest of the time before Gwen's alarm sounded. She groaned as she reached over and turned it off. Then, she returned to her spot on Peter's chest, closing her eyes and enjoying the moment. Neither Gwen nor MJ wanted to get up. But MJ glanced at Peter in confusion, thinking, what's this feeling of shame? Is he ashamed to have had a threesome with us? I thought he'd be the happiest. I'm not going to lie, this is really weird. Gwen said awkwardly, her eyes still closed. I don't know, I really enjoyed it, MJ said, sounding pleased. Of course you did. This was mostly your idea, you weirdo, Gwen teased, opening an eye and glancing across Peter's chest at MJ. So, when are we planning the next one? Peter asked with a smirk, looking between them. Gwen patted Peter's chest. Sorry, big guy. Only on special occasions. Aw. Both Peter and Gwen looked at MJ, raising an eyebrow, which made her blush and clear her throat. I mean, it was a special moment for all of us. I feel like we've grown closer because of it. It would just be a shame to limit it to 4 times a year or something. Just to be clear, this doesn't mean you guys can do this without me around. That would be cheating, Peter said. Obviously, Gwen and MJ scoffed. We only did it because we were with you, Gwen said, rolling her eyes. MJ nodded and kissed Peter on the cheek. The one we love is you, not each other. We did what we did because we love you. They both smirked at each other as they noticed Peter's ears turn slightly red. They began poking his cheek and chest, teasing him for being embarrassed. MJ sighed as she lifted herself up, sticking to the wall and jumping over Peter and Gwen to get off the bed. We have to leave early if we don't want to be late. Peter groaned. Why do we even go to school? What's the point? He whined, hugging Gwen tighter, making her smile as they both watched MJ get dressed, putting on her bra and underwear. Because some of us aren't as smart as you, Parker, and you said it yourself. This is mostly for the high school memories, MJ said as she finished hooking up her bra. It was a rhetorical question. Peter mumbled, shooting a web at the ceiling and pulling himself up, quickly putting on his underwear and pants. MJ put on her shirt and shoes before fully buttoning up her pants, while Peter paused, halfway into putting on his shirt. He noticed Gwen biting her lip as she looked at him from under the blanket. Peter flexed his muscles and winked at her, making her roll her eyes, though a smile grew on her face under the covers as she watched him finish putting on his shirt. He gave Gwen a final kiss before he and MJ turned invisible and jumped out the window. As they swung home, MJ glanced in Peter's direction and used her spider telepathy to communicate, so what was that earlier? What was what? Peter asked, confused, as he ran alongside a building and parkoured around it. Earlier, you were feeling ashamed. I was wondering what you were ashamed of. It wasn't about what we did, right? MJ asked cautiously. Oh God, no. That was fantastic, 10 out of 10. I was mostly ashamed of myself, Peter said, reluctantly. Ashamed because of us. MJ sensed Peter's hesitation and quickly reassured him. You don't have to share if you don't want to. I'm not forcing you. I was just curious. Her earnest tone only made Peter feel guiltier as he debated whether to tell her or not. When they arrived at MJ's place, Peter surprised her by entering with her. Undoing his invisibility, he hung upside down in her room. I had a wet dream. Huh. Buffed. MJ couldn't help but stifle a laugh, covering her mouth. Okay. It was after we, finished, and I fell asleep. I had this wet dream, and I woke up because of your oral skills. Buffed, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Peter, having a wet dream isn't something to be ashamed of. MJ said, holding his upside-down face. Especially when I was the one who caused it, she teased, caressing his face gently. That's the thing. Even though you were the one who caused it, it's who the wet dream was about that I'm ashamed of. It was Felicia, wasn't it? MJ smirked in amusement and couldn't help but chuckle as she saw Peter wince. He covered his face. I feel so ashamed, honestly. I have 2 gorgeous goddesses by my side, and then I have a dream about Felicia. What's worse is that I feel like I betrayed her slightly just by thinking about her like that. MJ slowly caressed Peter's face, trying to calm his turbulent emotions, which surprisingly worked as he began to calm down a bit. MJ chuckled again. Peter, your son from the future just came to see you, and his mother is Felicia. It's no wonder you're thinking about her like that. That's basically saying you two are guaranteed to have sex. So, it's not that strange for you to have a naughty thought or two about her. Tell me honestly, are you some kind of spider therapist? Because you always know what to say to make me feel better. MJ giggled in amusement before the two shared an upside-down Spider-Man kiss. Well, it certainly helps to know what you're feeling, that's for sure. Peter then got down, shaking his head as the blood rushed to it. I always feel like I'm dumping all my emotions on you, Peter said, feeling a bit guilty. MJ moved closer to Peter, pressing her body against his, making him subconsciously pull her close. That's the thing. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. She smiled as she caressed his confused expression. You see, as someone who's so closely connected to spiders, I think each one of them chooses us for a specific reason and a specific role we're supposed to fill. Like, it wasn't a coincidence that we were bitten by the spiders that bit us. Let's take us, for example. MJ said, closing her eyes and pressing her forehead against Peter's, making him close his eyes as well. You were bitten by a spider with electrical abilities, which makes perfect sense when you think about it. Electricity is all about energy, power, and connection. It surges through everything, just like you. You've always been the kind of person who brings people together, who leads and connects with others. You're the one people turn to in a crisis because you have that spark, that energy that draws people in and makes them feel safe. You inspire others to follow, to act. Peter blinked, taken aback, and MJ smiled softly. It's more than just powers, Tiger. I believe the electric spider chose you because it saw a leader. Someone with the strength to keep everyone grounded, but with the ability to light the way forward when things get tough. That's why you've always felt this need to be there for everyone, you're meant to be a leader. MJ smiled softly, keeping her forehead against Peter's. And as for me, the spider that bit me wasn't just any spider either. It gave me the ability to understand and communicate with spiders, and I think it happened for a reason too. It's not just about controlling them or sensing them around me, it's about understanding them, and in a way, understanding you. She paused for a moment, running her fingers along Peter's cheek. You've always had this way of carrying so much on your shoulders, more than anyone should. You try to process everything on your own, and I get it. It's hard for you to let people in, to share what you're feeling, especially when you feel like you have to be the strong one all the time. Peter stayed quiet, his expression softening as MJ continued. I think the spider chose me because my role is to help you with all that, to understand the parts of you that are hidden, the emotions you struggle with but can't always say out loud. That's why I can feel what you feel, why I can read your emotions even when you try to hide them. It's not a coincidence. I was given this ability so I could be there for you in a way no one else can. That's my role, to help you process what's too much for you to handle alone. You've seriously put a lot of thought into this, haven't you? Peter asked with an awkward smile. MJ smirked as she shrugged. You were the one who taught us Rule 13, remember? In this world, if it seems like a coincidence, then it most likely isn't. And let me tell you, all of us getting bitten by spiders is one hell of a coincidence if I ever saw one. What's even more of a coincidence is that the spiders that bit us were enhanced. She grinned, quoting him, like the unofficial title you had for this rule, coincidence. I think not. Chapter 188, The Time Lord Emerges, Third Person's POV. After his talk with MJ, Peter gave her one last kiss before heading home. After a quick shower, Peter rushed downstairs, phone in hand, and sat beside Uncle Ben. Before Peter could say anything, Uncle Ben gave him a teasing look. Someone was only supposed to make sure she got home safely. It seems they got distracted and didn't come home until this morning. Peter glanced at Aunt May to make sure she wasn't looking, then held up 3 fingers toward Uncle Ben with a smug expression. Uncle Ben tilted his head, confused by the gesture. Peter emphasized the 3 fingers, shaking them a bit before bringing them together with his other hand. Uncle Ben's eyes slowly widened as he processed the meaning. Oh. 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 Oh, what? Aunt May laughed, amused. Peter slapped Uncle Ben's shoulder for being too loud. Oh, nothing, Aunt May. Uncle Ben's just surprised that the microwave blender time machine actually works. Huh? Really? Aunt May asked, curious. Yeah, remember that old picture of me? Well, Aria got it because Felix contacted my future self using the microwave blender. Which I'm still kinda mad about since I could have solved time travel when I was younger. Really? Uncle Ben asked. Yeah, look, Peter said, showing him the picture on his phone and motioning toward the microwave and blender. Not that, the other thing, Uncle Ben gestured. Oh, Peter said, making an okay sign while biting his lip proudly. I don't know whether to be extremely proud of you or disgusted by how openly you share this stuff with me, Uncle Ben whispered. Just go with pride, we have a situation. Arya suddenly interrupted, appearing as a hologram over Peter's watch. What is it? The Time Lord has appeared. We've detected a temporal anomaly in Times Square. Why is it always Times Square getting attacked? There are other places in New York, Peter grumbled, standing up. Sorry, Aunt May, Uncle Ben. I'll have to cut breakfast short, Peter said, grabbing his bag and rushing out. Aunt May didn't even have a chance to respond as the door shut behind him. She could only sigh in disappointment. As Peter reached the street, the door of MJ's house opened, and she came out hopping on one foot, trying to put on her shoes with a piece of toast in her mouth. MJ, seeing Peter, looked both ways before jogging over. Are you ready to go? She asked, jogging in place. As ready as I'll ever be, Peter said as they both started running at a normal pace. They turned into an alley and tapped their watches, suiting up. I'm sorry, but this is really bothering me. Was that toast dry? Peter asked as his mask began forming over his face. MJ, pulling down her red and white mask, nodded while chewing. Arya called when I was holding it. I didn't have time, don't blame me, I was really hungry, still am. Both Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider leaped out of the alley and started swinging through the city. Red, you know I love you, but what the hell is the matter with you? Who eats their toast dry? I was hungry. I would have buttered my toast if I could, she yelled, shooting webs as she swung. Spider-Man ran along a building, holding his web. Red, no matter how hungry I am, I'd never eat dry toast. Please, have some standards, he said, flipping off the building and swinging to the next. Yeah, my standards must be pretty shit if I'm dating you, she shot back. Shots fired. I repeat, shots fired. Men down. Men down. Where did this aggression come from? Spider-Man asked, clutching his chest and pretending to fall mid-swing before catching himself. Then don't make fun of the way I eat my toast, she grumbled. What's this I hear about eating toast? Ghost Spider asked, suddenly appearing, undoing her invisibility as she joined them in their swinging. She was eating dry toast like a maniac, Spider-Man said, pointing at Scarlet. Ghost Spider turned to Scarlet. What's wrong with you? Who eats their toast dry? I didn't have time. Scarlet snapped. You guys seem to be having an interesting conversation, they heard Nightwing's teasing voice. They looked up to see him dangling in the air, hooked to Firestar by a black web as she flew ahead, as he was spinning around. Firestar waved cheerfully. Hey, guys. Well, someone's having fun, Spider-Man teased. I just thought we'd fly by upon hearing the news, Nightwing said with a smirk. Hey, that's my line. I'm the one that's flying here. Firestar chimed in. The group soon turned a corner, making their way toward Times Square. Roar. They looked toward the sound only to see Spider-Cat riding on Felix, who had transformed into his tiger form. She flashed them a smug grin. Yippee-ki-yay, mofos, she shouted, flashing a peace sign with her tongue sticking out. Is that? Nightwing asked slowly, not quite believing what he was seeing. Felix, yeah, Spider-Man muttered, shaking his head. She's riding a tiger. I wanna ride a tiger. White Fang, Winston said, appearing next to Arya, who was sitting calmly. Seeing Spider-Man's confused expression, Winston elaborated, Felix's hero codename. It's the White Fang. I'll keep that in mind, Spider-Man nodded. Alright, since everyone's here, let's pick up the pace. Blue lightning crackled across Spider-Man's body as he blitzed ahead. The rest of the group quickly followed suit, accelerating toward Times Square. In Times Square, a swirling gray portal had materialized in the middle of the street. Pedestrians on their way to work paused, phones out, recording and wondering what was happening. Everyone, make way. Super Duper Spider is making a landing. The crowd quickly stepped back as Spider-Man dropped from the sky, landing with one knee and fist to the ground, the road cracking beneath him from the impact. Behind him, Ghost Spider and Scarlet Spider landed in classic Spider-Man poses. Ghost Spider stood up with one hand on her hip, while Scarlet Spider slowly rose, placing both hands on her hips. Spider-Cat jumped off Felix, doing a front flip with her arms extended, and landed gracefully. As they say, a cat always lands on her feet, she quipped. Nightwing released his web as it disintegrated in midair, pulling out his Eskrima sticks while landing on one knee. Green static flickered between the weapons as he rose into a martial arts stance. Firestar circled above them, leaving a fiery trail behind her before stopping midair, her fists glowing brightly. As for White Fang, his transformation reversed, revealing his bipedal form in full for the first time. He now wore a black and white bodysuit, the web-like lines replaced with tiger stripes, all pointing toward the Spider-Man symbol on his chest. His suit had a white hood and a fur collar around his neck and wrists. The group assembled in front of the gray portal, which swirled ominously before them. Spectators snapped even more photos. Please get away from here. We don't know what dangers could come from that portal at any moment. Spider-Man warned firmly. We won't be able to help you all if you just stand there, Spider-Cat added bluntly. Before anyone could react or move, the portal's movements became erratic, swirling and warping chaotically, heightening the tension in the air. Slowly, a leg stepped through as a figure materialized from the portal. He was wearing a green three-piece suit with a monocle and a top hat, with a clock embedded at the center. In his hands was a pocket watch. In the nick of time, if I do say so myself, he chuckled. White Fang was taken aback upon seeing the Time Lord. Before he was an older man, but now he appeared as a teenager and no older than them. However, White Fang didn't care about that. He shot forward, the ground splintering under his strength as he appeared before the Time Lord, his leg already in motion to kick him square in the head. A magic circle appeared before the Time Lord's hands, and Felix froze in place, time itself holding him still. Is it me, or have you gotten slower? The Time Lord teased. He then turned toward Spider-Man and made a mocking, stunned expression. Oh my, oh my. If it isn't the amazing Spider-Man, the Time Lord exclaimed, taking off his top hat, placing it over his chest, and giving an exaggerated bow. I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to finally meet you. Clearing his throat, the Time Lord continued, I suppose it's time I introduce myself to the audience, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen of New York City, I am known as the Time Lord. Nightwing, uninterested in the theatrics, rolled his eyes and was about to lunge at him. Don't, Spider-Man stopped him, placing a hand on his chest. What? Why? Because every time we attack, we get frozen in time. Spider-Man stated solemnly. Even with your speed? Ghost Spider asked in surprise. For some reason, it's not, for some reason, it's because I'm stronger now, the Time Lord interrupted with a large grin. I'm better. I can see what you'll do before you even make a move. His eyes began glowing a green hue. After being stuck in the time stream for so many years, experiencing the memories of my future self, I've mastered time magic. And after seeing the future ahead of me, I realized something. If I truly want to be free, I have to kill you before you grow any stronger. I see, so you're a coward, Spider-Man nodded, as if in understanding. Wah, I mean, even though you've said you've grown stronger, it seems like you're still too scared to face the future me, so you picked a time when I'm still in my growth phase. Seeing Spider-Man's tactic, the others joined in. Oh man, I thought we were finally going to face a real challenge, but it turns out to just be a cowardly villain. What a shame, Nightwing said, shaking his head in disappointment. As they all began making similar remarks, the Time Lord's expression darkened. I'm going to enjoy watching you suffer. Spider-Man shrugged. Doesn't make you any less of a coward. Chapter 189, The Time Lord Escapes, Third Person's POV. Hearing the insults hurled at him, the Time Lord snapped his fingers, causing everyone around him to freeze in place. He scoffed. From what I've heard, it's nearly impossible to shut them up. But look at me. I did it with just a snap of my fingers. Smiling, the Time Lord raised his hand, and a magic circle formed in his palm. Slowly, a sword began materializing from temporal energy. Sword of Decay, he muttered as the blade solidified. He smirked and casually walked toward Spider-Man. Look at you. So much for the world's most beloved hero. He chuckled to himself before lunging the sword forward, aiming for Spider-Man's heart. But, ever so slowly, Spider-Man's body shifted out of the way, leaving the Time Lord striking nothing but air, his face a mix of frustration and shock. He swung again, only for Spider-Man to arch back, hands extended, dodging the strike by the narrowest of margins, though still moving in slow motion. How the hell is he still moving? I didn't slow down time, I stopped it. There's no way he should still be able to move, the Time Lord hissed in disbelief. Frustrated, he began slashing faster, but Spider-Man moved effortlessly, as if taking a leisurely stroll, avoiding each attack with minimal effort. God damn it, the Time Lord roared, kicking out in a fit of rage. His foot connected with Spider-Man's torso, but it was as if he kicked a wall. "Aaaah," the Time Lord howled, hopping on one foot. That tough bastard. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, the Time Lord smiled wickedly. Fine, if I can't hurt you, I'll hurt someone you love. He scanned the area, then pointed. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I choose you, he said, his finger landing on Spider-Cat. I'll hurt both Spider-Man and his little cub. Consider it payback, for old time's sake, the Time Lord grinned, glancing at the frozen white fang. He walked toward Spider-Cat and sneered. It would be a shame if I killed you too quickly. It's so much more fun to watch them suffer slowly. And even more delightful to see the cub disappear. With a sinister grin, the Time Lord plunged the sword into Spider-Cat's stomach. Ha 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 ha. It appears you're not as fast as your husband. He cackled as blood splattered, freezing midair with the rest of time. Admiring his work, the Time Lord stepped back. Now, to watch the chaos unfold. But first, safety. He waved his hand, forming a protective dome around himself. Chronostasis, he muttered, completing the spell. Once at a safe distance, he snapped his fingers, and time resumed its natural flow. Even White Fang was freed from his control. Spider-Cat suddenly gasped, coughing up blood, and collapsed to her knees, clutching her stomach in agony. Everyone turned toward her, their faces frozen in horror. Spider-Cat removed her hands from the wound, her expression mirroring the horror around her as blood continued to flow from her mouth and wound. The gash in her stomach was grotesque, its edges decaying, revealing muscle tissue underneath, turning black as her insides rotted. "Mom." Felix screamed in anguish, rushing to her side. "Nuu," the others shouted, running to her aid, everyone except Spider-Man. He stood there, panting, eyes wide. His breaths became shallow, panic overtaking him as he watched Gwen desperately try to cover Felicia's wound with ice to slow the bleeding. Inside his suit, Peter's eyes changed, turning a shade of blue as lightning crackled around them. His breathing grew labored, sparks of static dancing between his fingers. He barely heard the screams of the panicked crowd fleeing for their lives or the voices of his team calling out to him. It was all a blur. Ha 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 ha, the Time Lord laughed, holding his stomach. You should see the looks on your faces. Priceless. What a shame, Spider-Man, you wear such a mask, I can't see your expression. But, I will admit, you have a much cooler suit in the future. Spider-Man's gaze slowly shifted toward the Time Lord, his muscles tensing. The Time Lord noticed the shift and mockingly shook his hands. Oh, I'm so scared. You're all tense, relax, man, relax those muscles, but before he could finish, his taunt turned to shock as his eyes gained a green glow towards them. Spider-Man's shoulders slumped, his muscles relaxing as an explosion of lightning erupted from his body. Electricity crackled around him, surging across the ground, scorching it with raw power. Suddenly, two large spikes shot out from Spider-Man's wrists, each crackling with energy. The arcs of lightning wrapped around the spikes, turning them a deep shade of blue, their bone-like appearance disappearing beneath the overwhelming power they held. With a thunderous boom, the ground beneath Spider-Man exploded, sending debris flying as he disappeared from where he stood. Aha! Spider-Man roared in fury as he slammed his electrified spikes into the Time Lord's shield. His attack seemed to slow as it made contact with the barrier, but Spider-Man's muscles tensed, his growl deepening with strain. The Time Lord's eyes widened in horror as the spikes began to carve deep gashes into his stasis shield, crackling with raw energy. The ground beneath Spider-Man crumbled further, splitting under the sheer force he was exerting, as his bioelectricity surged, tearing through the fabric of time itself. The Time Lord wasn't about to sit idly by. He summoned another temporal sword, thrusting it towards Spider-Man in a desperate attempt to retaliate. But almost like it was an instinct, four massive spider-like limbs, forged from pure bioelectricity, burst from Spider-Man's back. They moved with lightning speed, blocking the attack effortlessly, while Spider-Man drove his second spike into the shield, deepening the cut. TCH. The Time Lord grimaced, truly shaken for the first time. He's cutting through time itself, and he hasn't even reached his full potential yet. What a terrifying creature. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the Time Lord decided to escalate. Placing a hand on his chest, a glowing magic circle appeared as he muttered, "Temporal duplicate." 10 more magic circles materialized around him, each spawning a duplicate of the Time Lord. They say the more, the merrier, he smirked. And it seems we have all the time in the world. With one final, earth-shattering roar, Spider-Man shattered the chronostasis barrier. The sound of it breaking was like glass shattering, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The duplicates activated their magic simultaneously, using a technique called blink, a brief distortion of time that allowed them to appear as if they were teleporting. They blinked in rapid succession, surrounding Spider-Man, their decay swords poised for attack. But before Spider-Man could react, a fierce roar echoed through the air, "ROOOOAARRR." In a flash of blue lightning, White Fang tore through the duplicates, ripping them apart with savage precision. But the temporal forms dissipated into nothingness, revealing they were mere energy constructs of the real Time Lord. Spider-Man and White Fang moved in unison, honing in on the real Time Lord. Their claws and spikes aimed directly at his neck, their strikes deadly with intent. However, the Time Lord had already anticipated their move. With a snap of his fingers, he halted time once again, retreating to a safer distance. But even in the frozen world, Spider-Man and White Fang were still moving, their eyes blazing with fury, their bodies driven by pure bloodlust. In the Time Lord's perspective, they were moving at normal speed, slowly, yet inexorably, closing the gap. It was a disturbing sight, these two beings defying his command over time. With a frustrated scowl, the Time Lord conjured another sword, now dual-wielding. But as he did, he felt a shift in his body. His face grew older, his energy waning slightly. He clicked his tongue in irritation. Though he'd only aged by a year, it was clear that his overuse of temporal magic was taking its toll. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he prepared for the inevitable clash. "I've spent too much power. I'll have to end this soon," he muttered grimly. The Time Lord rushed forward, slashing with both of his temporal swords, his mind calculating their frenzy as a weakness. They should be sluggish in this state, unable to react as quickly, he thought. But his assumption proved wrong. Even in their enraged state, White Fang's claws and Spider-Man's bioelectric spikes were far too swift, their movements instinctive and lethal. White Fang's plasma claws clashed against one of the Time Lord's swords, while Spider-Man's electrified spike crashed against the other. Yet, a sharp bioelectric limb lashed across the Time Lord's chest, tearing a deep gash that sent him screaming in pain. "Curses," he snarled, gritting his teeth as the pain coursed through his body. He teleported a distance away, conjuring a magic circle that accelerated his healing. But in doing so, he dipped into his temporal reserves once more, aging yet another year. His body weakened slightly, but there was no other choice. Once stabilized, the Time Lord undid the time stop spell and created a swirling portal to the time stream behind him. As much fun as this was, it's time I say goodbye. "I'll be back, that I swear it," he yelled. He leapt toward the portal, but before he could fully escape, arcs of electricity ripped through the air, slashing toward him with terrifying speed. One electric slash caught him just before he entered the portal, severing one of his legs. His scream of agony echoed as he disappeared into the time stream. Spider-Man stood still for a moment, watching the Time Lord escape. "Arg damn it," he roared, slamming his fists into the ground. The force of his blow shattered the street, sending debris and vehicles flying. Peter's breath came in ragged gasps inside his mask, his teeth biting into his lip hard enough to draw blood. Tears blurred his vision. Felix, similarly devastated, was on the verge of losing control, fists clenched in fury. But before he could act, Nightwing appeared in a blur beside Spider-Man, his voice quiet but urgent. "Felicia needs you. You might be the only one who can help her, but not if you don't hurry." Nightwing's voice was strained, his own fists clenched so tightly they bled. Spider-Man and White Fang didn't hesitate, transforming into streaks of lightning as they sped toward Felicia. They arrived to find Felicia collapsed on the ground, clutching her stomach and coughing blood. Her wound was covered in ice, but it wasn't enough to stop the bleeding. Ghost Spider was kneeling beside her, sobbing. Her bleeding isn't stopping. Her healing factor's fighting, but she's not getting better. Scarlet Spider was holding Felicia's hand, tears streaming down her face. I can feel it, she's slowly dying. Felix's voice cracked as he sobbed, I shouldn't have come here. It was a mistake. I'm sorry, Mommy. Spider-Man knelt beside Felicia, placing his hands over her wound, silent tears streaking down his face. His heart pounded in his chest as he prepared to use his bioelectricity, hoping against hope that he could save her. But just as he was about to begin, shards of glass started appearing before them, slowly obscuring any outsider from looking at them. A cold voice interrupted. I wouldn't do that if I were you. You'll kill her. Everyone turned sharply toward the voice. Standing behind them, a mysterious figure dressed in an orange cloak emerged from a portal, her expression solemn. If you want her to live, she continued, you'll need my help. Chapter 190, Kamarja, Third Person's POV. Before anyone could comment on the sudden guest, Felix turned to everyone and said, you can trust her. Please save my mother, Felix pleaded. The hooded figure raised her hands, causing Felicia's body to levitate off the ground. Follow me, she said, turning back and walking through the open circle behind her. Everyone quickly followed, and as Firestar was the last to enter, the portal closed immediately behind her. They suddenly found themselves in what appeared to be a meditation room with a single pillow in the middle. The hooded figure went and sat down on the pillow. With a wave of her hand, she conjured a blanket and a pillow, gently laying Felicia down to rest her head. Who are you? Nightwing asked suspiciously, narrowing his eyes. Just because Felix said to trust her didn't mean he should lower his guard and trust her completely. For all he knew, she could be a bad person now but change and become better later on. The woman lowered her hood, revealing her shiny bald head. I am known as the Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, Master of the Mystic Arts, she said as she placed her hand over Felicia's stomach, right where the wound was, the area slowly darkening and rotting. Spider-Man didn't say anything. He just sat down next to Felicia, with one leg raised, his arm resting on his knee, and stared at her with a solemn expression, though it wasn't visible through his mask. The Ancient One quickly performed 3 hand signals over Felicia's wound before raising her hand as if pulling something out. Green energy appeared around the wound and shot up into her hand. She made a small rotating motion around the energy before holding it at her fingertips and snapping them. The energy transformed into a green wisp of fire and dissipated into the air. Immediately after the temporal energy was removed, the black around Felicia's wound began to change color as her healing factor kicked in at full force. It went from black to gray, to white, then pink, and finally red as her muscle tissues and damaged organs began to mend and heal. Her skin followed suit, healing over the wound until all that remained was clear, unblemished skin. The only trace left was the blood that had been expelled from the wound. With another snap of the Ancient One's fingers, the blood vanished, and the hole in Felicia's suit mended itself. What a strong healing factor, the Ancient One remarked. If it weren't for her healing factor, she would have died within seconds. Hearing this, Spider-Man's fists clenched, while Felix bowed with his fist against his palm. Thank you, Ms. Ancient One. You have my sincere gratitude. The Ancient One smiled and nodded, accepting his thanks. The others followed suit, expressing their gratitude, though Spider-Man remained silent, only nodding. Felicia groaned as she lifted herself up on her elbows. Why am I always the one getting targeted? Talk about unlucky. Ghost, Scarlet, and Firestar immediately tackled her in a hug. Oof, she exclaimed from the impact. She glanced teasingly at Nightwing and Spider-Man. Careful, guys. These lovely ladies seem to like me a lot. I might just take them for myself. Harry scoffed with a smile, relieved to see Felicia was all right, but Spider-Man remained unusually quiet. The Ancient One chuckled softly, finding their banter amusing. Felix, however, knelt in front of Felicia, looking down in shame. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. I've put you in danger. Because of my presence, you almost died. No, you are meant to be here. This was meant to happen, the Ancient One said with a serious expression, drawing everyone's attention. Ah. Are you saying I was supposed to almost die and get stabbed in the gut? Felicia asked, furrowing her brows. Yes and no, the Ancient One replied before turning to Felix. The young time traveler here is meant to be part of this timeline, along with the villain who followed. This is a fixed moment in time. Time's mechanisms are complicated, but I'll try to explain. Time itself is a paradox. It is both constant and ever-changing, never truly defined, she began. She first turned to Felix. Your presence at this point in time is something constant, she then turned to Felicia, but your survival isn't. You didn't have to be the one attacked and injured, it could have been you, or you, or you, she said, gesturing at Felicia before glancing at the others. Then, facing Felicia again, she added, not to mention the possibility of your survival or death. Like I said, it's paradoxical. Some moments in time are so fixed that no matter what you do, they won't change. And then there are moments so flexible that the tiniest influence can alter everything. Thanks. It's nice to know that whether I live or die matters so little in the grand scheme of things, Felicia muttered, displeased. Felix raised his hand. Wait, why is my being here so important? That's something I still don't understand, no matter how many times I try to wrap my head around it. The Ancient One smiled, her gaze shifting back to Felix. There are several reasons. One of them is that you're the connection that introduces Spider-Man and his team to the mystical and magical side of the world. You're the gateway that opens a new path for them. In this crazy world of ours, there are threats not only in the physical realm but in the metaphysical as well, as you've all seen with the Time Lord. Seriously? Felix asked, surprised at the importance of his role. The Ancient One nodded, her expression growing serious. This might come as a surprise to some of you, but we aren't alone in this universe. There are forces out there that could destroy our entire galaxy with a snap of their fingers. Everyone's eyes widened in shock and horror, except for Felix, who nodded as if he'd already come to terms with it. Hold on, let's back up for a second, Ghost Spider interrupted, waving her hands for the Ancient One to slow down. You're throwing too much information at us at once, and some of it is seriously freaking me out. The Ancient One nodded, understanding. I can see how this information might be overwhelming. I'm more than willing to answer any questions you have. Ghost Spider nodded. All right, let's start with something simple. I understand you're called the Ancient One, but why? Actually, forgive my rudeness, the Ancient One said, waving her hands to conjure a tea kettle and various cups. She filled each cup with tea, then levitated them to the group. Tea. Seeing how she'd gone out of her way, everyone accepted the tea. She smiled, placing the kettle down and holding her cup delicately in her hands. Now, where was I? Oh yes. I'm called the Ancient One because I'm over 1,000 years old, PFTTT. Those who had taken a sip of tea spit it out in shock. Nightwing banged on his chest, coughing, before glaring at her. You totally made us drink first on purpose, didn't you? The Ancient One merely sipped her tea calmly, a serene smile on her face. Next question. Firestar raised her hand tentatively. Can I ask it? Seeing everyone turn to her, she continued. Where exactly are we? We stepped through this weird portal, but we have no idea where we are. Ah, a very good question, Ms. Allen, the Ancient One smiled. At her words, everyone froze and quickly moved into defensive stances, save for Spider-Man and Felix. Spider-Man quietly lowered his mask just enough to sip his tea, entirely unbothered that she knew their identities. Firestar's hands began to glow with heat as she narrowed her eyes. So you know who I am. I know who all of you are, Harry Osborn, Elizabeth Allen, Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, Felicia Hardy, Felix Parker, and Peter Parker. You may have the ability to shield your identities from technology, but when it comes to the mystical realm, you're all vulnerable. That's precisely why Felix's presence here is so important. The group exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with how much she knew about them. The Ancient One stood from her seat. As for your question, Ms. Allen, we are currently in Nepal, in the Kamartaj Sanctum Sanctorum, where I teach and guide those interested in the mystic arts. As she then began walking ahead of everyone, come along everyone, I'll give you a proper tour of this place. Everyone stood up and began following the Ancient One as she went and opened the door. On the other side of the door was a training yard where members were seen battling each other, mostly using stick weapons. "Wait, I'm sorry, but did you just Nepal?" Ghost asked in shock to find herself so far away from home. "Just how does that portal of yours work? Please tell me there's at least a scientific explanation for it." And the answer isn't only because it's magic. Meanwhile, Scarlet looked toward Spider-Man with concern. She's always known him to be the most talkative person she knew, always saying what he was thinking, always making a joke. But ever since they have arrived at the Camartage, neither Spider-Man or Peter Parker have said a single word since they had arrived. All Scarlet knew was that Felicia's near-death experience had affected Peter a whole lot more. However, she also knew it affected every single of them as well. Peter was just taking it the hardest. Chapter 191, Universal and Dimensional Traveling, Third Person's POV. Wait, there's something I don't get. Why are you showing us around? Are you expecting us to learn magic or something? Nightwing asked, glancing around in awe as the Ancient One led them through the vast library. Shelves upon shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls lined the walls, each one a treasure trove of knowledge, collected over centuries by those who protected the sanctum. The Ancient One paused, turning to face the group with a serene expression. Felicia, eyes wide with curiosity, couldn't hold back her excitement. "Could we even learn magic?" "That sounds freaking awesome," she said, her voice full of hope. With a soft smile, the Ancient One looked from Nightwing to Felicia, patiently addressing their curiosity. Magic, at its essence, is the manipulation of energy, whether it comes from within oneself, the universe, or from other dimensions. She gestured gracefully to the rows of books around them. "You asked if you could learn magic, and the answer is yes, anyone can, in theory. The potential to harness these forces exists within everyone. However, the ease with which someone can access it varies. Some are born with an affinity, while others require discipline and training to unlock this potential." She paused for a moment, letting the information sink in before continuing. "There are three main categories of magic: personal energies, which come from within; universal energies, the forces that bind and shape the universe; and dimensional energies, which are drawn from alternate dimensions and realms. Every form of magic stems from one or a combination of these sources. To make this more relatable," she said, turning toward Spider-Man and Ghost Spider, "your bioelectricity, a form of chi, is already a manifestation of internal energy, personal energy. With discipline and training, that same chi can be harnessed to perform what we call chi magic, enabling you to manipulate that energy for more than just your physical abilities. You could heal, defend, or even reshape the world around you." She paused, meeting Felicia's gaze. "In other words, magic is not some unreachable force. It's about learning how to access and manipulate the energies that already exist, whether from within, the universe, or beyond. It just requires time, practice, and the right mindset." Scarlet Spider raised her hand as if she were in school. The Ancient One, amused, called on her after they moved out of the library. "I kinda understand the part about personal energy, but could you elaborate on universal and dimensional energies?" Scarlet asked, confused. "That is better shown than told. Gather around me in a circle," the Ancient One instructed. They hesitated, exchanging glances, before slowly forming a circle. Felix stayed back, raising his hands in surrender. "I already went through this, I don't need to do it again." "You know magic?" Felicia asked curiously. Felix shook his head. "Magic involves a lot of reading. Every time I tried, I'd fall asleep immediately, so I gave up on it." Everyone stared at Felix in disbelief, while Spider-Cat covered her face in disappointment. "I have a lazy son in the future, just great." Felix shrugged. "You call that lazy? I call it efficient. Why waste time learning magic when I can get someone else to do it for me?" "Like Uncle Ste. The Ancient One interrupted, wiggling her fingers at Felix to stop him from saying more. "Right, sorry. Now, before we begin, know two things: 1, don't resist, and 2, don't act on your instincts to stop me." Before Ghost Spider could finish her question, the Ancient One spun quickly, thrusting her palm and sending them all backwards, arching their bodies as their heads rolled back from the force. They were soon spiraling through multiple dimensions, causing most of them to scream and flail as they traveled. Yet they were entranced by everything around them. Peter remained still, absorbing everything, even though he had waited long for this moment. Despite wanting to enjoy it fully, circumstances dampened his experience. Still, he marveled at the beauty around him, thinking, to protect and preserve this beauty is one of the many reasons I fight. As they tumbled through a kaleidoscope of dimensions, the Ancient One's voice carried through the chaos, calm and steady. What you're experiencing now is a glimpse of universal and dimensional energies. Universal energy is what shapes and binds the cosmos. It's the force that creates stars, governs gravity, and maintains the natural laws of reality. It is the very fabric of the universe itself, and learning to harness it allows one to manipulate these forces. They hurtled through a dimension of pure light, where colors flowed like rivers and stars formed and died in seconds. Think of universal energy as the lifeblood of existence. If you can tap into it, you can influence the natural order, control elements like time, space, and matter. Next, they plunged into a darker, more chaotic realm, where monstrous figures loomed, and the very air felt heavy with tension. Dimensional energy, on the other hand, is power drawn from alternate realms and planes of existence. Each dimension is governed by its own rules, and some are home to entities far older and more powerful than we can imagine. They offer their energy to those who know how to ask, though often at a cost. They pass through surreal landscapes, cosmic spirals, cascading worlds, and dimensions with colors and forms beyond anything they had ever imagined. Despite the overwhelming strangeness, they were transfixed. Each dimension had its own unique beauty and order, even if chaotic at first glance. The Ancient One's voice remained steady. By tapping into dimensional energies, one can achieve feats that defy the laws of our world, summoning, banishing, even reshaping reality itself. But be cautious, the power you borrow is not your own, and every realm has its price. They flew through a fiery dimension, where colossal beings roared in battle, then into one made entirely of shifting geometric shapes. Felicia, her eyes wide with awe, shouted, "This is insane. We're really moving between dimensions." The Ancient One smiled, her voice soft but serious. "Indeed. These energies surround us and permeate us. With the right knowledge, anyone can access them. But remember, great power comes with great responsibility. The more you open yourself to these forces, the more they can shape you." Peter almost laughed when she said the quote, almost. Gwen tried to speak, but the rapid journey left her breathless. Harry, though more composed, felt the weight of the experience pressing down on him, his mind racing with thoughts of the endless beauty and danger within each realm. "You are witnessing only a glimpse of what exists beyond the physical universe," the Ancient One continued, her voice now omnipresent. "These dimensions are where magic draws its power, whether from the raw energies of reality itself, from conscious beings, or from forces beyond your wildest dreams." Suddenly, the rush of their journey began to slow, as if gravity were reasserting itself. The chaotic swirl of sights and sounds settled into a more familiar sensation. The Ancient One's voice softened as they neared the end of their journey. "Remember, these realms may seem distant, but they are connected to everything you know. Magic allows you to shape reality, to protect, to heal, and sometimes, to destroy." Before they could go further, Peter, Gwen, MJ, and Felicia froze. Their surroundings changed abruptly. They were no longer floating in the vastness of space, instead, they found themselves trapped in a giant spider web, cocooned in silk. From the darkness beyond the web, 8 glowing red eyes appeared. A sinister voice echoed around them, "Grow stronger, my little spiderlings. A great war awaits you all in the future." Without warning, they were ripped from the cocoon and hurled back into the swirling dimensions, continuing their multiversal flight. When they finally slowed and reformed into their physical bodies, they landed on solid ground, slightly dazed. The Ancient One stood before them, hands calmly clasped. "Now," she said with a serene smile, "this is where your true understanding of magic begins." All at once, they collapsed, gasping for air. "That was so cool!" Firestar exclaimed, her eyes alight with excitement, her interest in magic skyrocketing. Nightwing chuckled in amazement, clearly taken with what they had just experienced. He and Firestar slowly rose to their feet. But Spider-Man, Gwen, MJ, and Felicia were still on all fours, shaking with fear and drenched in sweat. Their breathing was ragged, and their faces pale with terror. Felix looked down at them, concerned. The Ancient One furrowed her brow, confused. "What did you four witness that has you so unsettled?" Ghost Spider stammered, unable to form words. Spider-Cat, however, had no such problem. It was a freaky giant spider. Scarlet Spider swallowed hard and added, "It mentioned something about a great war." Ghost Spider hugged herself tightly, whispering, "Who the hell was that?" Felix's eyes widened in shock, and Nightwing and Firestar shared equally alarmed expressions. The Ancient One wore a solemn look as she responded, "I believe you have just met the true source of your powers, the Great Weaver."